Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Kenton Hornbeck of the BeckDeck podcast. Just got done holding my breath, and I'm joined alongside Logan Decker. Logan, we have a pretty special episode this week, but before we get into all of that, how you been?
I've been doing great, man. Enjoying some great weather. I took a trip back home to Cincinnati this past weekend to surprise my mom for her birthday and an early Mother's Day, so it was nice to see the family. It hasn't been since like January, around New Year's, since I've seen them. So it was good to get together. I am super excited about this episode. I know we've been on a little bit of a delay. Part of that's just been because of travel, but also because we wanted to put together the NFL draft spectacular for you. You know, this is arguably, I'm not saying we're trying to mimic this, but this is Pat McAfee's greatest show of the year for ESPN. And I wanted, and we both wanted, to bring some magic to this because for us, you know, we're both NFL fans first. We've been on a dry spell since the Super Bowl, and April is that moment where the draft happens where every team in the league has some excitement. Well, most teams, unless you don't have a first-round draft pick, and you're kind of sitting there a little sad on Thursday. But moves can happen. Anybody can get in, and we also had some fantastic news. If you're a Bengals fan, in my opinion, on Saturday night, the Bengals made arguably the biggest trade in franchise history since the Carson Palmer trade. So I'll say, hey, how was your weekend? How is everything going for you, man? And what are your thoughts on the biggest trade in the Natty?
So I've been fighting off these allergies, these sicknesses, everything like that. Typical, although I have a great update. So I was previously abusing Afrin like an idiot, and it just made my nose way more stuffy. I couldn't breathe. I've not discovered, but one of my coworkers like, hey, have you ever tried Flonase? Well, lo and behold, as a sickly little kid, I had tried Flonase, but it had been a really long time. So I thought it was still like behind the counter. You needed a prescription for it. I had no idea that you could just go into Walgreens and buy it. So I ended up getting some, and it's completely changed my nasal game. And I've been breathing well, let's say. But
it's a game changer, man.
It is. You know what? I can't believe I had went this long without having it before, to be honest. I mean, I feel like I'd been living in misery, really, for the past couple years during the springtime. But then we clean the house, we kick up a bunch of dust. I'm going to bed, like, wheezing and stuff. We have a cat. I'm not allergic to cats, but once, dusty, and you have cat dander and everything everywhere. So I've been abusing my inhaler, and I'm just like, I can't break this cycle of whatever weird allergy is the flavor of the month. But regardless, the weather has been also very nice up here. Thank God I've been able to walk around outside with shorts, short sleeve shirts on. It's been very nice. But that is not the best news in the Cincinnati area, because there was arguably, I mean, we were kicking this around a little before we hopped on here, but I mean, it's probably fair to say this is one of the three biggest moves, at least trade-wise, in the history of the Bengals. Certainly maybe the biggest trade since the Carson Palmer trade, unless we're omitting something. But it's an easy one to figure out, folks. The Bengals traded the number 10 overall pick, a pick we had discussed many times on this show previously, to the New York Giants, who are now coached by John Harbaugh, former Ravens coach. The Giants sent back defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence. Sexy Dexy, as Bengals fans love to call him. He is one of the best defensive tackles in the National Football League. He is coming off a little bit of a down year. However, he has commanded plenty of double teams. He's one of the most heavily guarded nose tackles in the entire league. So, tit for tat, I think it's pretty good that the Bengals went out and did this. And it was a one-for-one trade. So you give up the pick for the asset, and the Bengals also, because I believe he had 2 years left on his remaining Giants contract, They extended him, I think, by a year. So now the Bengals have 3 years of team control. Don't quote me on this, but I think they're paying him at least $28 million this year. That's off the top of my head. And some further context before I give my opinion on the entire thing, which I'm sure you guys probably have already figured out. But he had been going through a contract dispute with the Giants. And the Giants, he had played there for 7 seasons. He was a holdover from a previous regime at this point because John Harbaugh was brought in. Now, Joe Shane still remains the general manager of the Giants, but Harbaugh, I don't think wants that kind of friction in his locker room. I think he didn't want to go through the contract dispute, and I think Lawrence was threatening to sit out or not play if he was not able to reach a new deal with the squad, so they trade him to Cincinnati. So, what's my opinion on all of this? Well, I'm going to stab a straw man to death here, so just be warned. But in the media, I'm seeing a lot of negative reactions, and there's many positive reactions to this trade too. And I say this as a local and kind of a Bengals enjoyer, but not a Bengals fan. This is a good move for the Bengals. Now, in the media, I've seen people circulating the opinion that the draft pick was more valuable than Lawrence straight up. And I totally disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think during a previous draft episode, I had made the point that the Bengals needed to do everything they could to lock down Caleb Downs if he was there at the number 10 pick, even arguing that you trade a later round pick and your first round pick to maybe even move up marginally to select him. Obviously, I didn't know that they were going to make this type of move, but the reason I was so steadfast on that opinion is due to the fact that to me there's like 7 guys you really, really, really want in this whole draft, and Cincinnati has a certain amount of needs. Caleb Downs would have been an absolute ringer for the Bengals if he was able to fall to 10. Now, what I think happened, and this I think is becoming the consensus, so I'm not the only one repeating this opinion, but I think the Bengals looked at their draft board and they evaluated who was actually going to be there at 10, because in recent days I had read mock drafts that had them selecting a corner at 10. The 2 top corners in the draft are Mansour Delane, or Delaney if I'm mispronouncing that, at LSU. And then the second corner ranked was, The second corner was Jermod McCoy from the University of Tennessee, who tore his knee up this past year. So he would have been coming off a pretty significant knee injury. I think, the Bengals need corners, but they don't need corners. Like, that's not that's not a point of emphasis for them. They have a decent secondary right now, albeit they're pretty young. They also signed Brian Cook from Kansas City to kind of shore up their safety room. So anyway, they're looking at the draft. They're like, who could we actually select at number 10? I don't think they felt very comfortable with any of the players that would have been available to them. And I think they were probably really hoping for Caleb Downs or maybe a Reuben Bain, as we had discussed before. But I think those players are going earlier. I think those guys are too good, and it was not going to be available to them. So, while Duke Tobin actually made a great move, and he's been much maligned, but he looked at this and said, hey, I'm trading the number 10 pick for arguably one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. He seemingly wants to be here. We're gonna pay him a little bit, and he's going to be the centerpiece of our defensive line, one of the weakest portions of the Bengals' horrible defense over the past couple of years. So I have to give Duke Tobin a lot of credit for what he's been able to do this offseason, shoring up portions of this defense. Now, they're still incredibly weak at linebacker. They're going to be really leaning on Demetrius Knight. They're also going to have Oren Burks is going to have a better season. But by and large, their secondary is all right. And up front, they've seemingly gotten a lot better. Now, back to the media straw man. I think that the idea that you don't make this trade to get some type of monetary relief is a little ridiculous because, as you might already assume, the Bengals are already committing a large chunk of money to 3 players. They're clearly all in. They're pushing all of their chips into the center of the table with a move like this. And at number 10, there was not going to be a player good enough to usurp the already available talent of Dexter Lawrence. There just wasn't going to be that. So they need immediate impact on the defense. One of the problems with the Bengals drafting, and I'll just use last year as an example, and you could even say the Armarius Mims pick too, or the Dax Hill pick. Mims, Hill end up being pretty solid players, but it took them a couple years. But the Bengals, coming off the Super Bowl in 2022 and then in subsequent seasons, needed their rookies to be good immediately. They needed impact players, especially on defense and offense, frankly, right off the bat, especially on that line. They took Shamar Stewart last year. I'm not saying he was a bust last year. I don't know if he's going to end up being a bust in his career, but they took a project player at their first-round pick, and he did not really contribute whatsoever. He was often injured. He didn't really play very much, and when he was on the field, he didn't really play a lot. Like, he didn't play great. So they need a guy who's going to play immediately. And to me, Caleb Downs was a player who you could put in, and he's going to be immediately good, kind of like a Kyle Hamilton. And same with the Ruben Bain, even if the arm thing is a little weird. But if you can't get a player who's going to be good immediately, then you go and get a guy who's already good. He's already a Pro Bowler. He's already one of the best defensive tackles in the league. Once they lost DJ Reader a couple seasons ago, that left a huge hole in their defense. They've never been able to fill it. Dexter Lawrence fills that hole. Pause. But I think people are looking too far into the negative for Cincinnati here, because with all of these narratives flying around about how the Bengals need to win now, I'm thinking that Duke Tobin is thinking, hey, if there's some narrative timeline about Joe Burrow maybe wanting to trade out of here in a year or two, then we don't need to look 3 years down the road. We need to be good now, because we know if he's healthy, we can be good now. I think the division's gotten worse. Yes, the Steelers are going to be a playoff threat, I would say. They're a veteran team, even though they changed over from Mike Tomlin. We still are kind of wondering what they're going to do at quarterback, but by and large, Pittsburgh's still pretty good. The Ravens, we don't know. I don't think they're going to be bad, but we really don't know. So Cincinnati has kind of been on the back burner of these conversations, and they're like, we already have a great offense. We know the offense is going to be good when they're on the field. The offensive line has gotten better. If we can take this defense from 32nd ranked or 30th ranked and we can put them to like 21, 20, I think we're a playoff team, and I think, they're going to be a good contender strictly off the play of the quarterback and their offensive capabilities. If you're playing for now, you don't need to worry about what the number 10 overall draft pick in a weak-ish draft, not a weak draft, but a weak-ish draft, because I do think there's some good players here. People in the national media crush the Bengals for never going all in, never spending money, and I think that's such a lazy take. It's historically accurate, but contemporarily lazy, because the Bengals have shown they are willing to keep the wide receiver core together. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, they've signed their quarterback for their long-term deal. They've spent around the edges. Last year, Noah Fant, that signing didn't work out. They put a franchise tag on Trey Hendrickson, and they have went out and now made this move. So they have been willing to spend money. They're not made of money, but they have been willing to spend money. And this is not a very normal Bengals move. I mean, they don't generally make a move like this. So to me, the signals they want to be competitive immediately. The last thing I'll say before I hand it off to you is that I think Trey Hendrickson, there's been this narrative that Trey Hendrickson, why didn't you just pay him what he wanted and save the number 10 overall pick? So essentially, save Trey Hendrickson and keep the number 10 overall pick. I think that's misguided. I think that's incorrect. I think that bridge had been burned already. I don't think Trey Hendrickson wanted to be in Cincinnati anymore. I think everybody kind of was aware of that. He's more expensive than Dexter Lawrence is at the moment. And I think that Trey Hendrickson's sacks, and a lot of people don't want to hear this, and this isn't just some Bengals talking point, but I genuinely think this. A lot of them are largely overrated. The Bengals needed real help in the run defense game. And Trey Hendrickson is not a great defender against the run. He did get a lot of sacks, but I think that's kind of a misleading stat. If you're doing these lazy, like NBA-type comparisons, sure, you could put a graphic of Dexter Lawrence up on the screen next to a graphic of Trey Hendrickson. It's like Trey Hendrickson got 14 and a half sacks, and Dexter Lawrence got a half a sack. And it's like, that's the worst football analysis. I think a third grader could do that football analysis. I mean, what are we even talking about here? So I think getting off Trey Hendrickson, who was a good player for them, and replacing him with a slightly cheaper, more important positional need in Dexter Lawrence was a great move. Could be a job-saving move by Duke Tobin. I think it puts the Bengals in immediate contention, if not at the top of the line, to win the division. And that's saying a lot. At least they do that. That does that for me. And the last kind of thing I'll say is I don't think they're done. I think they could still potentially sign Joey Bosa for a cheap-ish veteran contract. I think there's still a little more wiggle room here, and we don't even know how they're going to draft yet because second-round picks are generally very valuable, so they could still make some moves here. Logan, what do you think about the Dexter Lawrence trade? Did you like it? Did you hate it? From a defensive standpoint, what are you kind of seeing on how he fits in?
I loved it. I thought this, and I kind of led off with it in the intro of the show, I thought this is one of the best trades, let's just say in our lifetimes for the Bengals. That's the potential that this has. Keeping in mind with, let's just say I'll stay on the Trey Hendrickson point. Dexter Lawrence is 2 years younger. He's a different mold of basically athlete. He's basically a true nose tackle. He's top 3 in the league at this position. Trey Hendrickson is definitely a savant in the pass rush, but he was not a huge help with the run game, which is where the Bengals were getting gouged last year. And I love them bringing in Dexter Lawrence, not only because of the individual athlete himself, 3-time Pro Bowler, 2-time second-team All-Pro, is that who else they brought in with them? Look at this defensive line that they've rebuilt, that they went out and spent the money for this offseason. Of course, Dexter Lawrence with the trade. They get Jonathan Allen from Minnesota, Boye Mafe from Seattle. Miles Murphy is a linchpin, and he's still going to be on that D-line. Shamar Stewart's going to be in the rotation. TJ Slayton Jr., B.J. Hill, Cindric John. This is a phenomenal defensive line that they've rebuilt in 1 year, and they have depth there. So if a guy does go down, or they can keep guys fresh with a healthy rotation on this front, and this is going to be a huge problem for a lot of other NFL teams. And think of it like this. Dexter Lawrence, who he was playing with the Giants, is like he's playing against Dallas twice a year, every year. He's playing against Philadelphia twice a year, he's playing against some of the best offensive linemen year in and year out in his career. So let's just say he's going against the Ravens, who just lost their center, Linderbaum. You don't think he's going to be a nightmare for the Ravens? You think the Steelers with their patchwork offensive line they're going to be a problem for them? He is a monster. And just on what his production is, and even I think one of the things you probably saw, and we all seen if you've been in that space with social media, is that he had a down year. He got hurt last year. He kind of fell off. Let me tell you the stats for the team defense of the Giants last year. So this is Dexter Lawrence off the field. They are 32nd rank in yards per attempt allowed. They are 31 in sack rate, 27 EPA in pass, 26 in pass success, 23 in pressure rate. You want those numbers low. This is a bottom-tier defense in the league. And with Brian Burns and Abdul Carter and all these phenomenal players on this defense. But when Dex is on the field, they are 7th in pass success rate. They are 8th in yards per attempt allowed, 9th in sack rate, 10 in EPA in pass allowed, and 22 in pressure rate. This guy is a basically a black hole in the middle of this defensive line. He demands double teams. And this is why I like the combination. Even though they brought in Jonathan Allen, they can have success with B.J. Hill off of this rotation here. So Lawrence eats up blockers. I've already said that. Since 2001, he's had a 53.2 double team percentage on every single snap. And that is the highest in the NFL per the NFL research. And basically over that time span, that's over 1,100 double teams past 5 seasons. He's the only player in the league in this time span to have quadruple digits in this. Consider his new teammate, former teammate as well, B.J. Hill, who ranks 3rd in this time frame with 980 double teams. Can you imagine having those two guys in the middle of the defensive line and just letting Myles Murphy, Boye Mafe, edge rushers, the linebackers on a blitz? This is going to be a problem for every single team in the NFL. And we can talk about, like you mentioned, maybe they should have took a corner and they should have helped out. You know what? You build your defense from that defensive line standpoint, because it doesn't matter how good a quarterback is. If you get pressure on him, you keep pressure on him, he's going to make mistakes. You're allowed to have a weaker DB core if your front 4, your front 7 is going to be solid. And hey, you know what? For the 10th overall pick, straight up, this is a phenomenal deal. And they can still get help in the 2nd and 3rd round, because this is a wonderful defensive class to get help in the linebacker core, to get a deeper corner. This is a very underrated class. It's not getting the hype it's had in previous years because the offensive firepower in the quarterback realm particularly is relatively low compared to other years. We've seen it, if it's a big quarterback class, there's a lot of hype for it. This is going to be the class where there's a good amount of blue chips, and there's going to be guys that will be sticking on teams for a very long time, whether they're 1st, 2nd, 3rd round picks. So this class has the depth for you to give up that 10th overall pick, because at this point, like you had mentioned, who knows who's going to be there at 10 overall, who's going to move up, who's going to move down. So the Bengals said, we're going to get a guy right now who's 2 years younger than our defensive franchise player that just left to go to a division rival. Guess what? The bridges are burned. All right. And let's talk about that 10th overall pick, too, because everybody's like, you should have took that. There's a lot of value in that. The Bengals need to win right now, because guess what? The Bengals are the only team in their division that have the same head coach that they had the previous year. There's a lot of instability in that division. The Ravens have lost more players in free agency than they gained. The Steelers are trying to patchwork their team to try to make another run and cross their fingers that Aaron Rodgers returns to them. Otherwise, it's going to be Will Howard time. And then, the Browns, phenomenal roster, but guess what? They're in quarterback hell. So the Bengals have the most to gain coming into this year. I'd say it right now before even the draft, but before this trade, I was already thinking, man, they could be a favorite to win the division if they do everything right. This is a huge trade to help them out with it. And I point out the draft pick. Well, do I trust the Bengals in their draft history? Overall, no. Here's why. 2013, Tyler Eifert. 2014, Darqueze Dennard. 2015, Cedric Ogbuehi. 2016, William Jackson III. 2017, John Ross. 2018, Billy Price. 2019, Jonah Williams. Of course, 2020, the savior, Joe Burrow. I hope you hit on the number 1 overall pick. Number 5 overall pick in 21, Jamar Chase. I hope you hit on that. First wide receiver out of the class. 22, Daxton Hill. 23, Myles Murphy. 24, Marius Mims. 25, Shamar Stewart. There's been 2 home runs out of this and probably 2 to 3 solid players, and everybody else has been injury-riddled, or they've went on to other teams, or they're not in the league anymore. So even though with these picks, there's never a guarantee. There's absolutely never a guarantee. So guess what? Get the guy that you can get now that you are presuming is going to be on your team for at least 3 years, if not longer, and is going to be the centerpiece of this defensive line for years to come, and a team that that needs to win right now. You take draft to be better in the years to come. All right, to get a guy on your team in the draft that's going to walk in and be a Pro Bowler in this first year is like less than 2% chance of that happening. So take the guy that's already been there, that's already done it, and is, when healthy, one of, if not the best, true nose tackles in the game. He's going to be a problem. The Bengals made a phenomenal move. I love it, and I can't wait to see what they do in the draft throughout the rest of the week and what they do after the draft, because there's still a lot of key guys that haven't been signed because teams want to see how it shakes up in the draft, and then they'll fill up the roster. So there's still some guys out there, and the Bengals still have the cap to make the room for it.
Woo! Somebody cool him off. Somebody cool him off. But here, let me add something to kind of what you were alluding to, interdivision, is look at the opposing team's quarterbacks within the division, especially when you consider the beefed-up defensive line that Cincinnati now has. Pittsburgh, arguably the strongest contender to win the division. They'll either have Aaron Rodgers, who is a great quarterback, but age 40+, less mobile than he used to be. They also, if they don't have Aaron Rodgers, you mentioned Will Howard, who was a second-year player. He was also not a first-round draft pick. He was a solid quarterback prospect, but nothing like some of these other players that have been touted in years past. Okay, so we move on to the Ravens. Well, Lamar Jackson is a great quarterback. He is going to be a Hall of Famer. However, Lamar Jackson, I believe, has missed more games in the past 4 years than the often injured Joe Burrow. I'm pretty sure that's a fact. So he, especially when applied more pressure, not saying the Bengals are going to go out there and injure Lamar Jackson. All I'm saying is he gets beat up a little bit. He takes some hits, and I believe they've regressed a little bit along the offensive line. One of their best players, is it Tyler Linderbaum? He signed with the Raiders. That's a big loss for them. It really is. And then the last point here is the Cleveland Browns, who are, like you were saying, in quarterback hell. At the minimum, they're going to be facing a very young, inexperienced Shedeur Sanders back there. So with all three of those quarterback situations and the Bengals beefing up, and not just like you were saying, not just beefing up, I mean significantly improving to probably maybe a top 12 unit in the league on the defensive line. I mean, I don't want to say that, for fact, but I mean, I look at all the guys. B.J. Hill is a guy. Hopefully, maybe they get a little more out of Shamar Stewart this year. I mean, you talk about plugging the run. You got B.J. Hill, you got Dexter Lawrence, and then Shamar Stewart was touted not as a sacks merchant, but as a run stopper coming out of Texas A&M. That was the case for Shamar Stewart. If he's healthy, he's on the field. I mean, that could free him up a little bit. You got Boye Mafe. Miles Murphy actually is quietly, I believe, he's coming off a 5.5 sack season. He hasn't been really talked about a lot, and he's not a great player, but he is very large. He was a highly touted high school recruit. He was pretty good at Clemson for the most part, and he's steadily improved little by little every single year. He was a non-factor. Now he's a little bit better. So, like you were saying, I'm all in on this move. I think it was a great move. I think it's the kind of move that Bengals fans have been craving for years and years and years. And the talk about what's more valuable here, what's more valuable has been what's driving me crazy, is team control and monetary cheapness relative to a veteran player. Is that more important in this win-now situation, or is immediate talent, immediate impact to a team that is, let's be honest, they are not rebuilding. A rebuilding team covets that number 10 overall pick. And when I say covets, I mean they won't move off of it because they need that type of contractual control. Are the Bengals maybe setting themselves up for 4 years down the road, really tough contract situations? Sure. But the Bengals are banking on winning now. They need to win now, even though they haven't been in the playoffs the past couple of years. That's why you go out and get a Dexter Lawrence. That's why you make this trade. And if you're Zach Taylor and Duke Tobin, and to a lesser extent Elizabeth Blackburn, you make this move every single time because you are not guaranteed to be here next year. The same Bengals fans who are praising the trade are some of the same Bengals fans who were calling for the firing of Zach Taylor and Duke Tobin not even 7 months ago. So we have to take that into consideration. And by the way, that's not even to say that they were incorrect, maybe. But the Bengals, and to Mike Brown's modicum of credit here, he recognized the situation. Tobin recognized the situation in a division of frequent turnover because for so long the NFC or AFC North had been consistent. Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh, these are guys who were institutions within their respective franchises. When they move out, when they move on, well, where's all the continuity? Well, besides Lamar Jackson, the only quarterback, who had played in a playoff game for, I guess now Aaron Rodgers, but he's a mercenary at this point. It's Lamar and Joe. The only coach who is continuously there is Zach Taylor. So that's why you make this trade. That's why you make this bet. And it seems like Bengals fans, the Bengals locker room is all in on this. I don't know if you have anything else to add. That's kind of my 2 cents, but I do believe the media members who are negging this trade are totally wrong, and they're totally missing the context of not only the franchise, but the contract situation that the Lawrence and the Bengals find themselves in.
No, I think we have beat a dead horse. I think we're both in it. We are definitely both in agreement with it. I think we provided some fair points, and I think the rest of the AFC North should be scared of what the potential of this team is, especially this defense. Like you said, going from a bottom 5 unit even to a mid-tier unit, that is a phenomenal improvement in 1 year, and that is something that the Bengals can survive with. That's how the Atlanta Falcons went to the Super Bowl, with a top 5 offense and a mid-tier defense. All you got to do is catch hot and make sure you have strong points in the defensive line is a fantastic place to plant your flag.
All right. So I'll let you know what? I'll tee it up. So Logan pitched this to me a couple weeks ago. Obviously, we're trying to get back on our normal schedule here due to various personal or travel situations, whatever it may be. We're here now, and we're anticipating the draft on Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So what are we going to do? Well, we are going to do a mock draft. Both of us are. And we're going to present it here to you today. And then following the NFL draft, upon its conclusion, we're going to pod again and see how we did. We're going to compare each of our mock drafts to one another and the actual NFL draft. What picks did we hit on? What picks did we miss? Where was our calculus off? All of those things are going to be discussed during the following podcast. So, famously, you know what? I might tee this one up because I think we've said this before. Every pick besides number 1 overall is interesting. Number 1 overall, who are we going to take? Well, the Las Vegas Raiders are on the clock. They're going to take quarterback, Heisman Trophy winner, Fernando Mendoza from the University of Indiana, national champion Fernando Mendoza. Is that, I think, who you had at number 1 overall here?
It is. I think this is by far the most obvious pick. And if it doesn't happen, I think the world will implode on itself. But Mendoza is a Raider. We've known this ever since the national championship. Go ahead. I was going to say.
Go ahead.
Going into his profile a little bit, he is your typical prototype frame quarterback, 6'5", 225. He is surprisingly quick on his feet. He has great pocket mobility. He's not a true athlete. He's not got the Jalen Hurts, intangibles there with what he can do, but he has a great pressure sense around him. He's got a phenomenal arm. We've seen him make really tight throws, winning tough games, some of the toughest games in terms of schedule just in college football. We've seen this guy. He's a baller. He's a little corny, but that's okay. Guess who else is corny? Kirk Cousins. And this guy could potentially have more capabilities than Kirk Cousins did coming out of Michigan State. I do think that with him going to the Raiders, they have to make a really good job of trying to protect him, and they definitely beefed up some of this offensive line. They've been prepping for Mendoza to come in. And not only that, they signed Kirk Cousins to bring him in to probably do some tutelage. And I don't see Mendoza starting week 1. Could I see him getting back in at some degree to this season? Absolutely, depending on Kirk's play and health status. But I can definitely see the Raiders have a plan, and that's why I'm excited for him, is because I do think he's going to be successful in the NFL, and he's one of those guys that maybe isn't the Trevor Lawrence or the Andrew Luck, like the next coming of, this era of quarterback, but he has the potential, and with enough support around him with a fantastic new head coach and hopefully an organization that's got its head on its shoulders now, that he could develop into something special. And in terms of, I'm not going to do this with every player, but in terms of player comp, you might laugh at a couple of these. It kind of reminds me of Carson Palmer coming out. And just in terms of his style of play with pocket awareness, it kind of reminds me of Jameis Winston. Just how he navigates the pocket and his arm strength that he has. Definitely not personality-wise, but I see why he's going to be the number 1 overall pick coming in this draft. And you could make the argument that he could have been, let's say if he came out last year, he had the same season that he did, him and Cam Ward would have been a much more interesting conversation piece. But hands down, going number 1 overall, Fernando Mendoza.
All right, I'll tee you up for this one. With the number 2 overall pick, the New York Jets are on the clock. Logan, who are the often terrible New York Jets taking?
This is a tough one. Believe it or not, I've heard 2 different names stick out the past 2 weeks. And one of them is an Ohio State man. Which one? There's a lot. This is true. And one of them is David Bailey from Texas Tech. However, despite the recent rise of David Bailey in the Jets building, I still think they're going to take linebacker Arvell Reese from Ohio State. He's a very dynamic defender, particularly early in the season. He had 6.5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss. He's 6'4", 243 pounds. He's just explosive. He's athletic. He's lengthy, which is what you want for an outside linebacker, which is where he's going to be coming in. Most likely a Sam, but he can be an edge convert as well. He has flexibility. In terms of his traits with some different sites that I've been scouring, he ranks in the 99th percentile just in relative raw pass rush in terms of the skills that they operate in. But I think part of that, and this is where some teams get a little bit scared of a guy like Arvell Reese or this type of build, is when you're an in-betweener that maybe they put you in the wrong situation, or maybe you don't have as much time and focus on one spot. But he has all the athletic tools, and if you trust the Jets to develop him, and the Jets have had success in the past 10 years developing their defensive line and linebackers, then he can be a phenomenal dynamic player for them and be a centerpiece while they're retooling this defense after just trading away so many of their players in the past 5 years that were gold mines in terms of talent. So I like Arvell Reese here, despite the noise of David Bailey. They're going to take the guy that is more cemented and is projected by many people to be the number 2 overall pick for the New York Jets.
So far, we are 2 for 2. I also had the Jets taking Arvell Reese from Ohio State. Similar kind of breakdown to you. I think that the Jets would rather go with somebody who's, both of them are athletic freaks, but I think Arvell Reese is a little more intriguing for what the Jets are trying to do. And I think he's a bigger name prospect. It's going to be more attractive to fans. Not that that really matters in this context, but I think Arvell Reese is a player that Aaron Glenn can maybe even get a little bit creative with, because of, that tweener status a little bit. That's not always a bad thing in the NFL. And if you have a creative head coach, not saying that Aaron Glenn is, maybe you could get a little bit testy with it. I think that Arvell Reese is an athletic specimen. We all know this. And overall, I think he's going to be a good addition to a Jets team that really just needs talent across the board in any area, not just on defense.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal player, and I would say in terms of, he kind of reminds me of a bigger Isaiah Simmons, who was also this kind of prototype conversion player where he played safety and linebacker, whereas Reese has the capability to be linebacker and edge rusher, true edge rusher. So he kind of reminds me of that athletic ability. I would say he potentially has a higher potential than like Quay Walker did, who was a former Packer and just moved on from them. I feel like, at least for the next pick, unless you really want to dive back on Reese, this is where our drafts are going to start to go off the rails a little bit, just because of some information that I've been hearing. Now, take it with a grain of salt. You all can make fun of me on Sunday when we upload the new episode. But I've been hearing a lot of talk that the Arizona Cardinals do not want this number 3 pick, and they want to trade down. They want to get more picks to rebuild. And there's one team out there that is desperate and love the linebacker from Ohio State, Sonny Styles, who was in the front 7 with Arvell Reese. And that is the Dallas Cowboys. And, of course, they have some extra capital from dealing with the Packers. And in terms of, I'm not going to sit here and predict what picks, but it wouldn't surprise me that they were to trade their number 12 and 20 pick to move up all the way to number 3. And the reason why they're doing this is because they know another team within their division, the New York Giants, love Sonny Styles. So they move up, take a phenomenal linebacker who was a former safety. 12 games in 23, switched to linebacker in 24, a part of that championship defense. He had over 100 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, forced fumble. He won first team All Big Ten, All-American honors. He's 6'5", 243 pounds, and over 33-inch arms. This guy is supposed to be the replacement that they had lost to the Packers with Micah Parsons. This is their new guy, their athletic freak that can play all over the field. He's a phenomenal coverage defender because he has that background as a safety, and he's so aggressive when attacking blockers and trying to get through the gaps, and he is just so athletic that he could play at all 3 levels on the field. And this is the guy that the Cowboys severely miss. And believe it or not, with player comps, and this, I'll admit this one is not my own, but he's been getting a lot of comparisons to a much more athletic Leighton Vander Esch and Jack Campbell. So this guy is fundamentally sound. He plays all over the field. I could see Sonny Styles being a potential Rookie of the Year defensive candidate with the Cowboys if it were to happen in this situation. This is a big if. If the trade doesn't happen, you're all going to laugh at me, but I have a feeling Dallas is going to make a move up with their 2 extra picks.
I'll save my analysis of Sonny Styles for when he goes off the draft board for myself, but I had Arizona taking edge David Bailey from Texas Tech here. I didn't really incorporate any trades into my mock draft. It would have been a little complicated, and honestly, I just have no... Logan's more researched than I am on this, but really, I would have no clue as far as what really is enticing for specific teams going and moving up. So I stayed away from it, but I have Arizona taking just the talent pick. David Bailey here, one of the best pass rushers in FBS in college football last year out of Texas Tech. The gloveless wonder, he's an athletic freak. He's great with lateral quickness. I think Arizona just needs athletes out there. They are a team that is reshaping its identity because of the lack of Kyler Murray. Now, obviously, David Bailey plays on the defensive side of the ball. But when you get rid of your franchise quarterback like that, you're totally moving on from whatever previous era that you were in. So from 2019 to 2025, that was a specific era. Now Arizona's rewriting the book. They're going to go with the talented and high upside David Bailey out there in Glendale, Arizona. He's going to be a stalwart on their defense moving forward. All right. This one will be a fun one for you because I think no matter who I take here or who you take here, it's probably going to be a win. This is a win-win, and I'm going to preface me throwing it over to you with this, my little Colts fan caveat, but it's not a negative caveat. It's really just a comment. This is really disappointing for me. I think the shoe is about to be on the other foot for a little while. My team has not had a first-round pick this year, or will not have a first-round pick this year. We traded it for Sauce Gardner. Love Sauce Gardner. Shout out to the UC Bearcats. But we traded 2 away. And I think, especially with the offseason moves they've been making, my heated rival, in Tennessee is going to have a pretty good draft and has made good moves in the offseason. So with that, as frustrating as this may be, I'm going to hand it over to you. Logan, who are your Tennessee Titans going to take with the 4th overall pick? The new uniformed Tennessee Titans.
It's a new era, and we're going to bring in a new face of the franchise. It's going to be in the backfield with Cam Ward, and we're going to take a running back, Jeremiah Love, for Notre Dame. That's all we've been hearing about the past 2 to 3 weeks, how much this team and this front office loves Jeremiah Love. And at first, I was initially hesitant, but with all the moves that we made, just trying to stack up this defensive line, bringing in Wan'Dale Robinson, who I'm not going to sit here and say is like an uber phenomenal player, but I am excited that he's on the team. What we're missing is some help in the run game, but also I think why Jeremiah Love comes off this piece is that he is one of the best pass catchers that we've seen in the past few years coming out of the draft. You know, he's a little bit leaner, 6 foot, 214 pounds, but he is still physical. He is, you know, anytime you see him, if you watch Notre Dame highlights, he's often the fastest guy in the field. He's electric. He leaves defenders in the dust when he gets up to the second level. He has some phenomenal vision where he's patient. He waits for the hole to open up. And just, you know, I think he's going to be a phenomenal help to take the pressure off of Cam Ward and take some pressure off of the lineman as well because of his vision, and he's going to make just everybody look better. He's a good pass blocker as well, and to be quite honest, we needed a fresh face in the running back room just with Tony Pollard getting a little bit up there in age, and Tajay Spears, to be honest, I don't know if we're going to keep him or not. So add a guy in there that's going to be a massive help to the offense. You can put him in the slot if you want to. You can line him out as a receiver as well. So he really does remind me of kind of an Alvin Kamara, Jahmyr Gibbs type where get him in the open space. I don't care how you get him the ball. He's going to make a play. And I could say that is our greatest need a running back? No, but you don't get in a position like this to draft a potential generational running back. So get the weapon in there. And this is the Tennessee Titans, who are historically are phenomenal at drafting running backs. And let's be honest, ever since we've lost Derrick Henry, we've had this little bit of a hole and we've lost a little bit of identity. This is going to be exciting for us, and I can't wait to see him become a Titan. This one is one of my almost guaranteed picks that I think is going to happen. What's your take? Do you think they also go this route, or do they go potentially another on the defensive side? Or
like
wide
you,
receiver?
like you, I have them taking Jeremiah Love. I think this is a layup for the Titans. I mean, in terms of dynamics on offense, he's going to be a guy that's going to command the ball a lot. He's going to instantly become one of the premier players in the AFC South, in my opinion. I think this is a home run pick. Tennessee has completely remade their head coaching staff, or their coaching staff. Now with Robert Saleh, they obviously have former Bills offensive coordinator and now former Giants head coach Brian Daboll kind of leading that offense down there, who I still think is an amazing offensive coach. Obviously, he was the guy who helped Josh Allen become who he is today. And I think Jeremiah Love, as far as a dynamic, explosive playmaker, is going to fit in seamlessly in Tennessee, and he's going to command a lot of touches. He's going to take a lot of pressure also off Cam Ward, because one of the issues last year Cam Ward was facing in Tennessee was that he had to play a lot of hero ball. They did not have a lot of talent on offense. He didn't have really good offensive weapons to dump the ball off to. He was just kind of, and part of this is Cam Ward being a young quarterback. He comes from a situation in Miami where he was kind of enabled to run around. So now in Tennessee, last year he was kind of doing that. In the beginning, it didn't look so good. Moving on, later in the season, he started to figure it out. And I think when you give him a dynamic weapon, especially with the ball in his hands, getting some yak, making some moves, I think he's going to take a lot of pressure off Cam Ward, and it's going to allow the Titans to click more on offense. I think it's also going to allow Daboll to get a little more creative with the play calling on offense. And overall, I think this is just like I said, this is a layup. This is a home run. I'm not saying he's going to be one of the top 5 running backs in the league next year, but what I will say is, in terms of fantasy, this is a guy you should be targeting if he goes to the Tennessee Titans. That's all I'm going to say right here. And with that, I am going to move on to the next pick, and I'll lead it off here because you've already kind of talked about who I'm going to take here. But the New York Giants, the John Harbaugh, Joe Shane, New York Giants. Who are they going to take? Well, in my opinion, they're going Sonny Styles, linebacker, Ohio State, fast riser, up the draft board, dynamic talent, one of the most athletic linebackers in the entire class, in the entire country. I think that Sonny Styles is an easy pick for the Giants, who really have plenty of needs all across the defense, but especially now that they've lost Dexter Lawrence. Not that they play the same position, but you really need to get some more talent over on that defense. John Harbaugh selects guys who are going to be stalwarts in the locker room. He selects guys that are going to be there for multiple years, that are going to want to re-up contracts, and he's looking to build a culture there. And I think Sonny Styles is a culture setter because of his tenacious play on defense. I think he's going to be able to run around the field all over. You're going to line him up in plenty of different places. You're going to get a little bit creative over there in New York. And he just seems to be, to me, I don't want to use this word too much. This guy's he's a total ringer. I mean, this is a guy you take in any draft if he's available to you. And I think Ohio State, I mean, I'm looking down my mock draft here. There are just plenty of guys. We've already talked about one of them at the top, and there are plenty more Ohio State Buckeyes that are going to go off the board here. And one of the interesting things, I think Colin Cowherd said this when I was listening to him a couple weeks ago, is that coming into the season, I don't think Sonny Styles was really talked about as one of these guys who was going to be certainly a top 10 pick. I remember there were certain mock drafts I was looking at that had guys like Caleb Downs in the top 4. That's nothing against Caleb Downs, who I think is going to be a phenomenal player. I said that already, but Styles was a fast riser. As soon as he got out on the field this year, people started to notice his tape. They're like, this guy's going to be good. And I think New York is going to have a defensive stalwart for years to come in this guy right here. So that's where I'm at with the Giants. Who do you have New York taking at number 5?
You know, you have a new head coach with the team, with Harbaugh, and he is known for putting together some defensive masterpieces on that side of the ball. And one of the key things that he's always had on this defense, no matter with the Ravens throughout his entire tenure there, whether that's Ed Reed or Kyle Hamilton or Eric Weddle, he's always had one of his best players on the defense be at the safety position. The Giants need some help at that safety position. And Caleb Downs from Ohio State is going to be their pick at number 5 overall. Ever since he came into college, he's a 5-star recruit, went to Alabama, transferred to Ohio State for 2024 and 2025, 6 foot, 205 pounds. But they're saying he played safety and linebacker at Ohio State, so he will join in the box. He's definitely a help in the run. But they're saying he's just extremely fast. He has high IQ in terms of his angles and where he's reading and where he's almost trying to deceive the opposing quarterback's eyes, and he knows how to take on the blocks and which direction and angles to take him. He has been told, as in terms of like who's the glue guy on the team, they're saying that in terms of personality and who's a great locker room guy, it was almost unanimously Caleb Downs at Ohio State. He's that kind of player where he's going to basically hold this defense together. He's going to hold everybody else accountable. He's going to hold himself accountable. And, he has that versatility to where he can play 2 high, single high, box as a rover, big nickel, off man, end zone. He can do it all, and you can move him around the defensive side. So even though they're upset that they didn't get Sonny Styles because Dallas moved up in my mock, they are extremely happy to be in the position to still take a phenomenal talent in Caleb Downs, who fills a different positional need for them.
Excellent. I really like Caleb Downs, and I think we're going to have... No, actually, I take that back. Strike what I just said. All right, moving on to the Washington Commies, who, thank God, I talked about this some episodes ago, have moved on to their new jerseys, which are kind of
Hold on.
Oh,
I think you're skipping a team. I know nobody wants to remember about the Cleveland Browns, but they do exist.
You're right.
And they have another top 10 pick.
And actually, this is a little bit of a diverging opinion, I think, but I'm going to go ahead and kick it off here. I had Cleveland taking Carnell Tate from wide receiver U, Ohio State. Okay, before I get to Tate, I'm going to talk about Jerry Jeudy a little bit. I hate that guy. I'm not a fan of him. I don't hate him personally, although he seems to be... I don't even know. Okay. And I'm sure he could kick my ass because he's huge, but don't worry about it. I sports hate Jerry Jeudy. He is one of my least favorite players in the NFL. Coming out, he was supposed to be some kind of route-running savant. He was one of the best wide receivers in what was hailed as one of the best wide receiver classes ever. He has not materialized whatsoever in the NFL. He is a bottom-tier wide receiver, to put it lightly. And I don't mean he's like one of the worst wide receivers in the NFL. I guess what I mean is he is in terms of a starter level player, he's just bad. That's who Cleveland had as their number one last year, Jerry Jeudy. They have a severe lack of talent in their wide receiver room. So I have them picking Carnell Tate to remedy the situation. He obviously played at Ohio State, as mentioned before, and I think Carnell Tate is going to be a great addition for the Browns, who are lacking in talent in that area. Carnell Tate is, he's a big target. I think he is a good route runner. He's got pretty good hands, and he's going to be able to start immediately, and all three of those are things that the Browns desperately need. They need an impact level player immediately. Now, there are some other good wide receivers in this class, and these guys probably will be impact players. But I don't know if they're going to be, they maybe won't hit the ground running or have the opportunity to, as much as Carnell Tate. So that's who I had here at the 5th overall pick. Who did you take?
I'm following in suit. I have taken 4 Ohio State players in my top 6 picks, so that might be a record. It probably is in the NFL. But I agree. I think Carnell Tate is a fantastic fit in Cleveland. They need a true X wide receiver, a guy on the outside. He's just phenomenal. He's a great route runner for his size. He has great body control. His catching is what really stands out, especially in the 50-50 situations. He has a 28.2 catch rate over expectation in true media. So if you want to talk about who can we compare him to in the NFL, well, I can think of about anybody that you can think is the elite ball catcher. Terry McLaurin is the guy that kind of just does it, and he's amazing. That's who I'm thinking of in terms of his catching ability. If it goes up and it's 50-50, he's going to come down with it more often than not. But he is a deadly multi-level separator. He's phenomenal at one-up-ones. I would say his one weakness is I wouldn't say he's a rack run after catch threat, but he gets the separation. He can catch the ball anywhere that you want him to. And it's funny, the player comp that I've seen just continuously is that it is a George Pickens mold. So you could take your most hated player with Jerry Jeudy and move him somewhere else. Don't let him be the number one. Let him work in the slot. Let him be the opposite. Let him be the Y. Whatever it is, but Carnell Tate is going to walk on to that field and be the number one as soon as he enters the building there. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. And what's interesting, we'll get into this, but your wide receiver class this year is almost a pick your flavor. And it just so happens Cleveland needs an outside threat, and Carnell Tate is the best outside threat in this class.
Yeah, Carne Asada, Andrew Tate. That's who's going to be the Cleveland Browns' number one wide receiver going into next year. All right, next pick. The Washington, formerly redacted, Commanders. Really quick, new uniforms, called it. And I like the new arrow going through the center of the W on their alternates. I think it's a good callback to the Washington Redskins days. I like that they incorporated in a tasteful way a little bit of that. So Washington Commanders, Logan, who are the commies taking?
This is a guy that's already off your board. I think he slides, and I think he falls in the Commanders' lap, and they're going to be ecstatic about it, and that's David Bailey, the edge from Texas Tech. Basically, he was original player for Stanford, transferred to Texas Tech, where he just became consensus All-American, 14.5 sacks, 19.5 tackles for loss, 3 forced fumbles, and in terms of, I use the site PFSN in terms of an edge impact grade at a 92.9, which would be the best in the nation as a pure edge. 6'3", 250 pounds. You saw him at the combine. He's the one that blew up with in terms of his speed. I believe he ran a 4.39, if I remember correctly. This dude is a uber athlete. And I think what kind of blocks him and why he's sliding down for me is that he's a very, very sharp player, but he is one-dimensional. He is a put-your-hand-in-the-dirt, true pass-rushing edge. He did play linebacker for him. That is not his strength. His strength is not to drop in pass coverage, but he has the skills, the athleticism to potentially be the most productive edge rusher in this entire class. And it just so happens, just because of how the other teams in my mock like these other players and the way the trade works and what the team needs are, is that you can make the argument that the best non-quarterback player in the draft slides to 7 just because of positional needs, whereas Washington will just take anybody at this point on the defensive side of the ball. So I think they get a phenomenal pick. You know, if you're talking about comparisons in their database that I've looked at, they're looking at Brian Orakpo, Brian Burns, Tyus Bowser, and guess what? All those guys are extremely productive. I think you would want more than Tyus Bowser out of that, but hey, those first 2 guys you'd be extremely happy with. But I think he's going to be a phenomenal player. Washington will be ecstatic when they get him after the slide.
So I ended up taking Caleb Downs here. I think he's going to seamlessly fit into that Washington defense. I already kind of mentioned this before, and you had a big analysis of Caleb Downs a little bit earlier, but I think he's just a leader. I think he is a ringer. He's a stalwart piece on the defense. He's 6 foot, 205, prototypical good safety. He was on one of the most talented defenses in the United States last year. You know what? Really quick, it's crazy Ohio State didn't win the national championship. I mean, truly. Generational job by Fernando Mendoza, the Indiana Hoosiers, everybody involved with that organization, Kurt Signetti. Shout out to you all. But anyway, Caleb Downs, he's just a great player, and I think he's got like an NFL-ready frame. He's a very diverse kind of safety. He's going to be able to hawk balls. He's got great awareness, great ball skills, and he reads quarterbacks well. I think all of those, in addition to being very consistent production-wise, is going to really benefit the Commanders' defense. So I don't need to say much more about Caleb. Let's move on to the New Orleans Saints. Logan, who do you have the Saints taking in this draft?
This is where the Saints are also happy that the draft is shook out like this, because they're going to take Reuben Bain Jr., the edge from Miami, Florida. He racked up 7.5 sacks, 13 tackles for loss, 3 forced fumbles in that true freshman campaign of his. He's been All-American honors. He is, in terms of that edge rating I was talking about, 82.7, 275 pounds. He's kind of a unique build. You kind of already made a joke about his arms before, where there are some concerns about his arm length on the defensive side of the ball, but usually that is more impactful for the O-line versus the D-line. And he is a versatile player enough that where you can put him in multiple spots on that defensive line. Now, why he's been successful despite that arm length that everybody keeps hammering on about is that this dude has a adult man. He's got grown man strength in him. He's got a very deep pass rush bag. He's not just a bull rush guy. He has phenomenal IQ. Basically, if he's got to do the cut, if he's doing swims, whatever it is, he has phenomenal pursuit angles. And you can make the argument, at least I am, and I'm going to do it right now, in terms of the national championship game, he looked like the best player on the field for both teams. That was how I watched it, and I thought he's phenomenal. And in terms of a player comp, he kind of reminds me of Brandon Graham a lot. Definitely a little bit more undersized, but he can dominate in the run game. He can dominate in the pass game. He's going to be a phenomenal add to this New Orleans team, which is going to be a little bit sneaky in the NFC South this year.
And I'm following in your footsteps there. Likewise, I had the Saints taking Ruben Bain, who are trying to remake their formerly elderly defense. And I think Ruben Bain is going to be a primary piece going forward for them. For one, like you were saying, he's just a defensive monster. He's able to, he's a great tackler. He's physically imposing. He's 6'3", 275. He's got good leverage on people. He has short arms, but I don't think that's it doesn't limit him because he's such a talented maneuverer. He's got one of my favorite football sayings, and again, I didn't play football, but I love this saying, especially about edges and defensive linemen, is that he's got heavy hands. He puts his hands into you. It's like, bam, he can knock you back. He can knock you back on your ass. And I think Ruben Bain is going to be a great player for New Orleans. I don't want to say every player is going to be great, but I think this makes a lot of to me, this pick makes a lot of sense for them. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Cam Jordan, longtime New Orleans Saint, moved on. So they're going to need somebody to, take up a lot of production on that defensive the front half of that defense. So I really like Bain here to the Saints, and I really like the Saints going forward, especially if they make this pick. So with that, we're going to move on to number, I believe, 9. I think I'll leave this one off here because I think you have a little something cooking with this number 9 pick for Kansas City. So I have the Chiefs going normal. I have them taking corner, Mansour Delaney. I got them taking a corner here. And I think when I was doing this originally, and I didn't incorporate any trades into what I was filling out, but I think it's just a position that they could use on the defense, essentially. I think he's the top corner in the draft. You're like, well, did they take somebody on the offensive line here? Do they go corner? In the past, we were kind of talking about this at the beginning or before we hopped on. But, in the past, the Chiefs have really drafted for position of need. Like, what do we need right now? Because they've always been in this hyper-competitive window. Last year, the wheels kind of fell off. Patrick Mahomes got injured. He's coming off an injury. Travis Kelce's old and dating Taylor Swift. He doesn't really care as much anymore. So, and Andy Reid seems like he's kind of lost a step. So the Chiefs don't really need to be in a position where they're drafting for specific, we're getting this piece to, while it may not be the best pick available, we're going to get this pick to kind of bolster a certain weakness that we had. And I think, to me, Mansour Delaney, I think, is a player that is just going to elevate Spags' defense. They need somebody young. They need somebody who is contractually solid. And I think they've been dealing with some weird contract stuff already because, when you're competitive for a really long time, you don't have as much cap space to work with, I'm pretty sure. So anyway, that's who I had the Chiefs taking. What did you do with this?
You hyped it up too much. I was just bragging about their entire first-round draft. I also have them taking Mansour Delaney. But the reason why I think maybe I'm higher in terms of talent on this player is that, hey, you talked about wide receiver U. LSU is DBU. I'm not going to, you can argue with me on that one. But in 25, Delaney had 2 interceptions, 11 pass breakups. He had the highest cornerback impact score in the entire class. He held opposing quarterbacks to 26.7 passer rating, and he also boasted an insane forced incompletion percentage of 31.8 and allows just 1 reception every 26.8 coverage snaps. This guy is a monster. He's 6 foot, 187. He is extremely fast. He's fluid mover, great rotation of the hips, great vertical speed. Just, you mentioned ball hawking. He is a phenomenal just quick twitch athlete, and he is play boundary. He can play nickel. And he comes down and he's a really good effort into the into the run game, providing that support. And the reason why a lot of this is what you said is positional need. Hey, Kansas City lost Jalen Watson to the Rams. They lost their safety Brian Cook to the Bengals. They lost a depth position Keith Taylor to the Falcons at the corner. They've lost a lot in this DB core. And I think Mansour Delane is going to walk in and be the best corner on the roster from the get-go. And I think he's going to be better than Watson. He's going to be better than this. They had, I'm not saying that they had this plan all the way to go, but I think they were comfortable letting these guys walk because they've been doing the research, and they're going to take a corner with this first pick at number 9 overall. I think, even though I do like the corners overall as a class, I think he is the hands-down number 1 corner in this class, and he's going to be in the league for a very long time.
Ditto. Okay, moving on to the New York Giants pick at number 10. Former Cincinnati Bengals pick, I might add. This was the Dexter Lawrence trade. So it's going to kind of reshuffle a little bit of some things here, but I think it moves up a lot of the needs the Giants have. I had them taking Miami offensive tackle Francis M. I really don't know how to say this gentleman's name, but that's okay. I think he's probably regarded as the top tackle in the draft by most experts, and I think the Giants could just use offensive line help in general. You know, they've had inconsistent offensive line play over the past couple of years to outright poor offensive line play. One of the most, you know, the Giants had a few weeks last year where they were buzzing, you know, on the internet, in the game. People were really hype on Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterbo, all of those guys. But one of the prevailing themes of last year for the Giants was that Jackson Dart was frequently in the blue tent for either concussions or getting banged up, what have you. You can't have that when you have a young franchise quarterback, or at least that's what the Giants think of Jackson Dart because they invested a high draft pick in him. So what do they need to do? Well, they need to shore up that offensive line. Andrew Thomas, good player, albeit he's hurt sometimes. I think they just need to go with the safe pick. In my mock draft, they already have Sonny Styles to help out on defense. Now you go and help your young quarterback, Jackson Dart, by going out and getting the best offensive tackle in the draft, Francis M. That's who I have. New York Giants fans are probably going to feel pretty good regardless after this draft ends, unless Joe Shane messes it up like he's known to do. But, Logan, who do you have the G-Men taking at number 10?
I've also got them staying on the offensive side of the ball, and this is probably at least the first pick that was extremely tough for me to decide because of conflicting information. You know, Francis Magoya, the offensive tackle from Miami, is a phenomenal pick. I also regard him as the best tackle in this class. However, there's been a player, a little bit to my surprise, that has had, in terms of the number of visits to the Giants, he's had the most visits out of every other player in this class. And so I think with the Malik Neighbors injury and recovery, they're trying to get some more firepower for their quarterback, their second-year quarterback, and that is wide receiver Jordan Tyson from Arizona State University. Now, the big catch-up with Jordan Tyson is his injury history, where he's torn an ACL in the past, an MCL, a PCL. So he has yet to play in a full season. However, if he were to not have those injuries, he would be the number 1 wide receiver coming out of this class. 6'1", 195 pounds. He is basically, he's in between the line of this bigger catch-dominant wide receiver and the smaller route-running ones, but he does it all. He's a phenomenal accelerator. He is just in terms of foot quickness and his stride and that he moves, he's what I'd call like a stem operator, where he can basically run a route and break down almost any corner with any success. You give him the route, he's phenomenal in everything. He's a technician. He has a phenomenal run after catch, much better than Carnell Tate's. And even though he is a smaller guy, he produces higher than average in terms of his, let's just say, high ball catches, his contested catches. So he outperforms his frame and down the field opportunities there. But he is able to do that potentially just because of his speed and by his route running. So I think in terms of the route tree as a whole, he is the best route runner in this class. And I think this makes sense with this pairing with Malik Neighbors being more the deep threat. I mean, Neighbors can do a little bit of everything. I'm not saying he's just a deep threat, but I could see this being the pairing where it's like, hey, we got our two guys for the next 4 to 5, if not longer, years. So it's just what I've been hearing a lot. I think the Francis Magoa picks, in my mind, makes more sense, but I'm going off of what I've been hearing on social media, and I'm seeing like, okay, they're trying to get firepower in there, and they're also concerned. I don't know if Neighbors is going to be ready week 1, so they're trying to give a target just for their quarterback right out of the gate and develop some chemistry.
All right, so the Miami Dolphins are the next pick here, and I'm going to go ahead and lead this one off. So Miami is coming off of a pretty interesting, albeit bad season. I say interesting because they revived the horrible vibes around the team at the beginning of the year, at least to a certain extent. I think everybody thought that Miami was going to be one of the worst teams in the league. They were one of the worst teams in the league, but then they got a little momentum towards the end of the towards the middle of the season. They started winning some games. Ultimately, it hurt their draft position. They moved off Tua this offseason, and they are probably going to be the worst team in football this upcoming year unless the Jets outmaneuver them. So I have Miami taking Monroe Freeling at the number 11 pick here. I think they could use foundational pieces, and Monroe Freeling is a massive, massive man. 300 plus, 6'7". He played for the Georgia Bulldogs, an offensive line factory, and I think he's going to be a foundational piece for the Miami Dolphins going forward. Again, Miami's one of those teams who needs talent all the way around the board. They could really take anybody in this draft, and it would be a plus, in my opinion. I think Miami, when you look at their depth chart, they're obviously going to be playing Malik Willis at quarterback next year. Who knows how that'll go? Malik Willis has revived the conversation around him. I think he's probably not that bad, all things considered, but it won't go well for him if he's on his ass constantly, and he's going to be throwing to some absolute bottom-tier wide receivers. His running backs aren't very good. So Monroe Freeling, welcome to Miami, buddy. You're going to be great. I hope you put on some sunscreen because you are one of them kind of white boys, my friend. So, Logan, who are you taking with this pick? Who is the Miami Dolphins taking?
They are going to take a local boy. They are going to take the tackle that you took before with the Giants, and that's going to be Francis Magoa. You know, you've already talked to him a little bit, but you know, he walks in 6'6", 335 pounds, all ACC honors in 24 and 25, consensus All-American. You know, he is 6'6", 335. He's massive. He has so much inbuilt power. He's nimble. He's explosive. He has great, you know, hip flexibility, torque. And he kind of reminds me of Tyler Smith with Dallas. So I think he's a plug and play. You can put him on the left side. You can put him on the right side. He is, if you want to talk about other players in terms of, I mentioned Reuben Bain in that national championship game, Francis Magoa was having a field day on his side of the line there. I think he is, I've already mentioned, the best tackle in this class. I think he's the most complete one. And I think any team would be very extremely happy to have, but especially Miami, who is trying to do this rebuild. Hey, why not get your left or right tackle, put him wherever you want, and just let him defend whoever your future quarterback is going to be, whether that's Malik Willis or whoever you get down the road. You've already got your centerpiece in there on your offensive line. But yeah, that's Miami. Staying local, getting the guy in their backyard.
All right, I'm going to toss it to you first for this one. The Dallas Cowboys, right, are on the clock. The Dallas Cowboys
So
Jerry Jones.
So this is where I had Dallas trading one of those picks. So Arizona is sitting here in my mock draft, and Arizona is happy with this trade back because they get, in their opinion, the second best offensive tackle in the draft with Monroe Fielding from Georgia, 6'7", 315 pounds. He's got an 84-inch wingspan. He is an excellent athlete. Of course, he's got some phenomenal power, but what kind of sticks out is that between him and Francis Nagua, and why I have him number 2 in this class, is that they're saying that his hand usage is not as good as Magoa's. He needs to work on the placement of it. It's still pretty basic. He can get beat from better defensive ends and pass rushers with his weaker hand usage there. So swat at the hands. I'm not saying it's easy, but they're saying that that is a standout for him. But he's apparently very athletic for his build. If you want to talk about a player comp, kind of a Gabe Karimi, and they've even put him in the conversation of Joe Thomas. So this guy has the tools. If he can, work on his hands and just kind of continue to get better, he has the potential to be a centerpiece. They basically they took with, I believe, Parrish last year, Arizona did. So they secure the other side of their offensive line for the future for whoever quarterback they take in next year's draft class.
All right, so I had the Dallas Cowboys taking Dylan Thieneman, the white boy, the white safety, the exciting white from the University of Oregon, and formerly also of the Purdue Boilermakers. So I think he's going to be. Do y'all remember, audience? Do you remember Jeff Heath? Jeff Heath, former headhunter for the Dallas Cowboys. Well, I don't know if they play alike, but one thing they have similar is they're both white defensive back safeties. And I think Jerry Jones is a man of his word. And we all know, look, guys, we all know what kind of guy Jerry Jones is. Okay. So I think he's going to take Dylan here. And, when we actually get, all jokes aside, he's one of the best safeties in this draft. He's just a little bit behind Caleb Downs, who I think is the best safety, but he's got great instincts. He's got, good closing speed. He's got good range. I think he is an athlete that is, to do the trope. I think he's a little bit of an underrated athlete. But, Oregon, they don't recruit non-athletes. Doesn't matter who's the coach there. Oregon has guys on guys on guys. And I think he is he's got good ball skills. He's got high IQ. He's a good athlete. He's going to be able to, move around. And I think ultimately Dallas, when they have guys like Malik Hooker back there, or they had guys like that who are a little bit older, banged up, they need some fresh blood in their defensive backfield. And I think that Dylan Thieneman gives them that. So who do you have at the next pick, which is the Los Angeles Rams, one of the best teams in the NFL, consistent year in, year out? I think I'm going to like my pick, but who do you have here?
The Rams being at 13 is criminal. You all can thank the Atlanta Falcons for that, for putting them in this position to draft this playmaker. So keep in mind, you can make the argument that the NFC Championship might have been the actual Super Bowl, just in terms of entertainment factor, and they're so close. And this is a really complete team, and they've done a lot of investment on the defensive side of the ball the past couple years with a lot of their picks. I think they return back to the offensive side, and they're going to take basically the top 3 of the wide receivers with Mekhi Lemon from USC there. Now, the reason why I'm saying this in particular is that Devontae Adams, this is the last year in his contract, and they've actually already informed Devontae Adams, like, hey, not informed that they would take him, but what is your opinion about bringing on another, let's just say, bigger name wide receiver onto the team? And apparently Devontae Adams was fine with it, understanding. Plus, Puka Nacua is kind of having a miniature, Antonio Brown arc right now. We'll see how that turns out. I'm sure it'll be fine. But Mekhi Lemon from USC, 79 catches, 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns last year. He's ranked top 5 in terms of wide receiver grade at 85.1. 5'11", 195 pounds. He's a great route runner, electric play speed, good footwork, but what really does well is his body control and his instinct to find the openings in the defense. Especially I've already said that, hey, Carnell Tate is the deep ball specialist in this draft class. I've already said that Jordan Tyson is basically the route running, and Mekhi Lemon is the rack guy. He kind of reminds me of Puka a lot with how he plays the ball. He just knows where to find the openings in the second level once he has the ball. He is, once again, and it seems to be a tendency with all these guys, is that they are all very, very good pass catchers. None of them have an issue in terms of drops, great body control, good timing. In terms of Mekhi Lemon, in terms of a weakness, is that he's not the best in the press coverage, which I think makes sense for the Rams to take him because they're going to put him in the slot. And they're going to move him around with Puka Nacua and just give any defense nightmares with him. So he is potentially, man, between these three wide receivers, I like all three of them, but I think Mekhi Lemon has potentially the highest impact for his team this year just because the Rams are in the position to take him with the number 13 overall pick.
I went the same as you. I also had Los Angeles taking Mekhi Lemon, one of the best playmakers in the draft, and I thought you explained his physical attributes and potential impact on the Rams pretty well. I'm actually going to go a little bit different route here, and this isn't explicitly why they would take him because obviously his talent supersedes this kind of organizational need. But to me, he's kind of Puka insurance, and that's not, again, it's not explicitly what he is. You take him because he's going to be good, but I think ultimately it kind of, if the pie is like, I think that's like a 15% reason why you take a guy like this, because your star wide receiver is kind of, like you were saying, going on a miniature Antonio Brown arc, getting in trouble. He's in TMZ. He's a way bigger star than he was even 2 years ago when he broke onto the scene. People know who he is. He's going on kick streamers, streams. So when you take a guy like Puka, when you can't rely maybe on him as much because he may not be in the mix. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if he's just going to be solely focused on football. You can't just rely on an older Devontae Adams to pick up all of the offense production. I think Mekhi Lemon is going to be a good player for them. I think if Puka keeps his head on straight, he does not get hurt, and they have Devontae Adams being the fade merchant at the goal line. They have Lemon, and then they have Nacua. I think that is a really, really, really dynamic wide receiver core, probably one of the best in the NFL, to be honest, for Los Angeles, and they're going to be a threat once again next year. Sean McVay is going to add another weapon, and he's going to be able to scheme him up. And it's going to free probably Puka up to do some more stuff too because of the fit within the offense. So that's who I have. He's also a local boy, USC college, not going to have to go very far from the facility. So anyway, moving on to the next player in our draft. I believe it is the Baltimore Ravens on the clock. Logan, who did you have the Baltimore Ravens selecting?
I think this is going to be a classic Baltimore pick. I already mentioned earlier in the pod with the Dexter Lawrence trade and the analysis of the AFC North that they lost their best lineman with Linderbaum. And I think they take the best guard in the draft here, and that's Vega Iona from Penn State, 6'4", 330 pounds. He's basically the ideal profile for NFL interior lineman there. He's got great mobility, very good in terms of the lateral movement for pulling guards. He kind of they say he plays with the natural leverage. He's able to get underneath a lot of defensive players, basically with their chest. He has some great hand and techniques that they said. He's got some great awareness. He's really good at picking up stunts and keeping rushers basically inside of his frame for pass protection. He's kind of an all-around guy, certified mauler. He could definitely move people with his size. Pretty big for a guard. And the popular player comp that I keep seeing for him is that he's like Kevin Zeitler coming out, which would be a fantastic comparison. And, Baltimore would be very sad to see Linderbaum go. But if they were to get Vega Iona from Penn State, I think they would be extremely happy with the kind of restructure in their offensive line.
I had Baltimore taking offensive tackle or offensive lineman Spencer Fano from Utah. I think that entering this new era, you want to keep Lamar Jackson upright because he is the continuity between the John Harbaugh regime and the current head coach, Jesse Minter, who is formerly of the Chargers. And I think you just want to give Lamar some help. You want to give him some beef on that offensive line. Like I said earlier in the podcast, I believe he's missed more games over the past couple, I think like 4 years, than Joe Burrow, who's literally defined by injuries, unfortunately, to this point. So you want to get him some good, solid protection. This guy's a phenomenal athlete. He's got a football background, not just from him, his family, mind you, has a football background. So I think they take it, I think this is a safe pick. We both had him go online here, and I think ultimately that's going to manifest on draft day. Next pick, I believe, is Tampa Bay. So who do you have the Buccaneers taking here?
I do have a feeling that this is when our drafts are going to start to diverge a little bit. We're starting to get in the second half. It's going to be a little bit more wild. I do think Tampa kind of looks at, okay, who is the best player available for on the defensive side of the ball? That's what they're looking at, try to do some replenishment. And despite him recovering from the ACL tear, they're going to take the second best corner off of the table, and that's Jermon McCoy from Tennessee. I already mentioned he missed the entire season, but 5'11", 193 pounds, even though he is, let's just say, a little bit on the smaller side, he was, before the injury, very explosive. Long strider, acceleration, hyperfluidity in his hips. He basically is a transitional monster where he can use his speed and he can match fantastic route runners with how he can move his hips. He's a very good, basically planning of the foot, being able to change and cut on a dime and help in the run game as well, help stop the run. He's just extremely smooth. He's got very good, when I say acceleration, just getting out of his brakes, trying to chase these wide receivers. In 2024, he was noted to having 4 interceptions that year, and if he had not torn his ACL, you would have the McCoy Delane debate. This would be basically pick your quality of who you think would go as the top corner here. And I think out because of the injury, and they're saying that he looked really good at his pro day, so I think he'll definitely be ready for the start of the season. I think the the Buccaneers get a discounted player despite the injury history, and I think he's going to fill in really nicely to help in that defensive unit.
So I had Tampa taking, I can't really pronounce his name very well, but it's the first guard off of my board. I'm going to say Ola Ione from Penn State. Is that how you say his name?
Hey, you know what? Your guess is as good as mine. Apparently he goes by the nickname Vega, so Vega, so that's what I've been calling him.
Vega Ione, I think, is going to be going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers from Penn State. Just getting some offensive line help from Baker Mayfield, who's often banged up. And I think, like a lot of these offensive line picks, I think you're doing it, to shore up for your quarterback. It's a foundational piece moving forward. And generally, I think if, not all these guys are ringers, but if you take a guard in the first round, you're probably pretty sure of, the transition that's going to be able to happen. So I think ultimately they play it safe. They take a offensive lineman here and just kind of nail down a little bit more depth on the offensive line. Next, I believe we have the New York Jets. I'll lead it off here. I have them taking Jermod McCoy from the University of Tennessee, the second cornerback off of my list here. Obviously, the first was Mansour Delane going to the Chiefs. Jermod McCoy was the player I was alluding to earlier when we were discussing the Bengals. He tore his ACL, which has hurt his draft stock, but by and large, a lot of the mocks have him going like somewhere in between the 8 to 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 range. I have him slipping a little farther, and I think those discussions are starting to pick up online, and especially among the kind of Twitter sphere and the blogosphere. People are going to be like, well, he's hurt. He's coming off an injury. This is going to hurt his draft stock. Do we really want to invest this high of a pick on a guy like that who may be able to fall even later in the draft? My thing about McCoy is I think with the Sauce Gardner trade, and we obviously both had them taking Arvell Reese earlier in the draft. I think Aaron Glenn, defensive head coach, he wants to shore up that defense. He wants to build foundationally around the defense. And Jermod McCoy really helps fill a gap there that has been left without Sauce Gardner, essentially. They're going to take one of the top cornerbacks on the board here. And, McCoy is a great athlete. I remember listening to podcasts months ago during the season that pretty much universally said the first player off the board from the SEC would be Jermod McCoy. Now, obviously, that's not what we have going on here, but I think the first one I had was Mansour Delane, and I had Monroe Freeling. So not a super deep SEC draft at the top, but McCoy, I have him sliding slightly to the Jets. Going to be a piece in Aaron Glenn's defense going forward. Logan, who do you have New York taking here?
I got them on the opposite side of the ball, and I think it was pretty apparent that last year, once Garrett Wilson went down, that receiving core was pretty pathetic, what they could put up there. So I think with Geno Smith back in town, they are going to try to get him some help, try to get this offense moving, and they decided to take wide receiver Amar Cooper Jr. from Indiana. He's 6 foot, 201 pounds. They're calling him, he's a great pass catcher. He's got a low center of gravity. He has the extension, the height to be able to contest for the higher balls. He's a really good run after the catch threat. You saw it with Indiana there. He's a really good tempo control route runner. He's able to get some corners to make some mistakes, some bad mistakes, and that's how he is able to get open. I will say the only kind of knock on Omar Cooper coming out was he had a notable higher drop rate compared to the first wide receivers taken off of our draft boards. And I think for player comp-wise, you'll recognize this name. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Anthony Gonzalez, and he could be what Jermaine Burton should have been. I think he's got some phenomenal athletic ability, and I think he will shine as the number 2 over in the Jets, get him some more offensive help.
You know a lot more about football athleticism than I do, but man, you don't really hear Anthony Gonzalez too much in a sentence with.
I got some throwbacks for you.
Yeah, no kidding. Former United States representative Anthony Gonzalez, mind you. But anyway, I think Anthony, really quick on him.
I hit down memory lane.
Yeah, no kidding. Former Ohio State Buckeye. I was really rooting for him to, materialize, and I think he was more memorable for just playing with Peyton Manning than I think he actually was production-wise, but he did have some decent athletic traits, and he wasn't a bad receiver. I just think I think we remember him more fondly than his production actually
Yeah, and I kind of, when I throw these player comps out, I kind of mean more as in like their athletic profile versus what I think they'll turn into. I should say that. Am I a fucking expert in that? Absolutely not. I just want to give some more information just for some guys that maybe aren't aware of this draft class as possible and be like, who does he kind of play like? Who does he remind you of? And I'm just throwing that out there.
I think it's fun. I support it. With the next pick, I have the Detroit Lions taking offensive tackle Caden Proctor from Alabama with the retirement of Taylor Decker. Whether was it a retirement? Did he leave in free agency? I can't quite remember.
I believe it was a retirement.
Okay.
It was kind of an unexpected, like 29 years old, something like that. I can look that up real quick while you're...
I just think this is pretty straightforward. Alabama generally has athletic freaks on the offensive line. He's a big boy, heavy hands, and I think Caden Proctor fits in well with Detroit's what they're kind of doing there. They need to keep Jared Goff upright, who's not very mobile, and I think going forward, It's so weird. Do you remember a team that's had this many like young retirements off the offensive line? Obviously their center Frank Ragnow a year or two ago retired. I think he may have came back from for the playoffs, but he was retired. I mean, they've really thinned out up there, and it was one of the Lions' better attributes as a team for a long time. And I think I don't know why all these guys are deciding to retire early, but I think they go young here. I think they go offensive tackle, and I think they take Caden Proctor from Alabama. Who do you have, Detroit?
I did speak incorrectly. He is still technically a free agent, but the Lions had let him walk.
So strike half of that every week.
Yes. I do have Detroit sticking with the offensive tackle position as well because they need it. I agree with you on that. One of my tackles from Utah is still available, and they're going to take Spencer Fano, and Detroit would be ecstatic with this. 6'5", 304 pounds. He is a true athlete, a little bit smaller just in terms of the weight, but he makes for it with his athletic ability. He is a phenomenal run blocker. He's a great pass blocker. They're saying he is great, basically one of the best footwork in the class. But and good swivel work, but he is, he doesn't have to play. They've already got a phenomenal tackle already set up there whose name is escaping me, but he's basically an all-pro every year, and I'm mad that I can't remember it right now. But he gets to be in a really well-entrenched offensive line. He can learn a lot from his Pro Bowl teammates, and he has the flexibility to play left or right because Detroit already has one tackle already established for them. I could see him playing more on the right side just to start, but you could make the argument, I have Francis Magoa as the number one tackle, and it's just kind of, personal feeling on, I like Monroe feeling, or I like Spencer Fano, or I like, name another one of those top 3, 4, 5 offensive tackles outside of Francis Magoya, and you can have an understanding of it's more of a team fit for that player than it is a actual, ability at this point because they all do something really well. After Magoa, it's just that one of them's more of a run specialist, one of them's more of a pass specialist, one's on the left, one's on the right. But I do think that if Spencer Fano is there for Detroit, they're not going to let that shit go all the way to the 10 minutes. They're gonna have that pick set up ready to go.
All right, so for the next pick, it is the Minnesota Vikings. I have the Minnesota Vikings taking defensive tackle Peter Woods, one of the best defensive tackles, if not the best defensive tackle in the draft. He went to Clemson, and Minnesota has really had a weird offseason because they've had to shed a lot of salary. And famously, they lost Jonathan Allen, defensive tackle, who's now with Cincinnati. And I think that was more of a salary cut move, not because Jonathan Allen was a liability on defense. If you want Minnesota to succeed going forward, they need to get cheaper and they need to get younger. And I think Peter Woods fills that void for the Vikings. He fills the loss of the Jonathan Allen move. Jonathan Allen is a dynamic player on the defensive line. Peter Woods, he's a dynamic player along the defensive line. He's one of the many Clemson players who I think are about to go off the board here for both of us. And that's who I have Minnesota taking. Logan, who do you have the Vikings taking here?
I think your brother, who is a Vikings fan, would be ecstatic if this scenario worked out, but they get the safety from Oregon, Dylan Thieneman, and he is a phenomenal safety prospect. It's one of those where a lot of the tension in this draft class is going to Caleb Downs, but this guy from Oregon, man, he can play two high safety. He's a box rover. He can play single high. He's one of those also kind of glue guys that I had mentioned Downs as. He was, and still, you could say, he's the best Oregon defender on this team that made the playoffs last year. As a freshman in Purdue, he had 106 tackles, 2 tackles for losses, 6 interceptions, 2 pass breakups, 2 fumbles. And he just continued on with that play in Oregon where he had last year 96 tackles, 3.5 tackles for losses, 2 picks, 5 pass breakups, 6 foot, 207 pounds. He is basically a cerebral assassin, the way that they're saying that he manipulates and how he can, let's just say surprisingly quick. But we're saying that because he's a white safety. But there are some plays, if you look back on the tape, where he's on one side of the field and he recognizes what the offense is setting up, and he will be to break up the pass on the opposite side of the field. He flips his hips and he gets over there. So he's fast. He's explosive. He has a really good understanding of what the offense is trying to do. He's one of those guys that I can tell he spends a lot of time in the classroom or I shouldn't say the classroom, but in
the film
he's
room.
An analyzer of the film room. Thank you for that. But he is going to be a phenomenal, you plug him in, he's going to be a really good player, and it's definitely a position of need for the Vikings after losing Harrison Smith. He is not the same player as Harrison Smith, despite him also being a white safety. He is more of a coverage guy versus a run support guy, but he is still going to be, if he's there, a phenomenal fill-in, and you won't miss a beat in what you can do with Brian Flores and that defensive unit.
All right, next we have your new hometown team, the surprising NFC South champions. Why don't you go ahead and lead this one off? Who are the Carolina Panthers taking with this pick?
Carolina's kind of in an interesting spot here. I went back between two positions, and that is, do they join in the offensive tackle frenzy because their best tackle got hurt last year, and we don't think he's going to be ready for week one. But I do think they're like, okay, they just drafted Ted McMillan. They got Jalen Coker. They're like, okay, we really got to figure out this Bryce Young thing. We've been talking about that for months at this point. So let's go and draft the first tight end off the board from Oregon, Kenton Sadiq. And he's almost unanimously going against the first tight end off the board. Although in terms of stat line, it's not super impressive. He had 51 catches, 560 yards, and 8 total touchdowns. 6'3", 250 pounds. He is one of the most athletic tight ends that we've seen coming out. I would say, hey, if you want to think of Noah Fant and what he did with his 40 and just how much they were bragging about him, he's kind of in that same mold. He's a phenomenal run-after-catch guy. He is, if you want to talk about let's go after the middle of the defense, hit him with the seam, try to split the safeties, he's phenomenal at that. But he is kind of the guy, if I wanted to pull a comparison, the tight end for Buffalo currently, Dalton Kincaid, he is what Kincaid should have been. That's how I view Kenton Sadiq. I think he is very explosive. I think you can put him at the X, you can put him at Y, you can line him up. I don't think he can play a traditional, let's just say, tight end spot where he's going to be a very good run blocker for you, but I don't think that's what, you have Tommy Tremble for that. You have other tight ends on the roster for that, where you can just let him be the pass catcher and he can be a unique threat against the defense, where he's too quick for the linebackers, he's too big for the safeties, and potentially too quick for the safeties as well, depending on the defense that he's playing. But I have them getting another weapon for Bryce Young to try and defend their NFC South title.
We're in lockstep here. I also had them taking Oregon tight end Kenton Sadiq for many of the reasons you listed. I think, 6'3", 6'4", really, really heavy tight end. Kind of a, maybe not an every down player yet, but shows a lot of potential as a receiver. And I think the Dalton Kincaid comparison is very interesting. And hopefully, if you're a Panthers fan and you take Sadiq here, you want him to be on the field a little more than Dalton Kincaid, but as far as the use case scenario goes, I could definitely see him fitting in well. Bryce Young needs that kind of player. They haven't really hit on a lot of receivers. They did last year on Ted McMillan, but, Ted McMillan is more of a possession guy. He's not a home run guy, and I think, not a possession, more intermediate. He's not an explosive wide receiver, essentially.
He's not a burner. He's a big body that can put up a fight anywhere you throw the ball at him.
Yeah, and I think Bryce Young just needs another really reliable big safety blanket to get the ball to, especially if he's going to be under pressure a lot. I think we're in agreement on this one. The next pick is Dallas, back to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I believe, not to repeat it again, but you had Dallas trading this pick, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and lead it off here. I had Dallas taking Avion Terrell from Clemson, cornerback, just filling out their defensive backfield. That's kind of what I pictured them to do this draft. Obviously, I had them taking Dylan Finneman earlier, so now I have them taking a corner to go with it. And to me, again, I just think that's kind of the route that Jerry Jones and the Cowboys are going this draft. Now, it does make sense, your trade scenarios. Are they really, in all actual likelihood, going to take 2 DBs in the first round here? I don't know. They could, but there's some other things probably working behind the scenes. I wasn't really sure where to go with this pick, so I went with the athletic corner from Clemson. Jerry Jones and Dabo Swinney, 2 really classic, wholesome, good Christian boys. I had them linking up for this pick. Who are you taking right here?
Well, this is, like you said, with my trade here, is that I have Arizona sitting at this number 20 spot. And I think they go on the defensive side, and they take Keldrick Folk from Auburn, defensive end. This dude's a mammoth, 6'5", 288 pounds. He is one of those, you sound 288, and like, man, how big is this guy? He's one of those top flight, lean mass, in terms of just, the length, the reach, the explosiveness. He's a hyper elite, very raw kind of prospect with the strength. He really kind of heavily relies on his speed, his power. I wouldn't say he's got a lot of pass rush tricks in his bag. I think that's something that can easily be learned with the right coaching staff. In terms of just stats-wise, he had 7 sacks last year, 11 tackles for losses. I should say that in 24, and the reason why he slipped a little bit is that those stats haven't been as good as they were in 24. He's basically what they're saying is that if he can get caught by a more grounded or, let's just say, fundamentally sound tackle, that it can be a problem for him. And he's had some inconsistency with that. But in terms of the potential, 6'5", 288 with his physical test that he's done, if Arizona can kind of work him up a little bit, he can definitely be a threat and a consistent guy on that defensive line for.
All right, so with the next pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers are on the clock. I'm going to let you lead this one off here. Pittsburgh, where they going?
It's a little bit of insight on this. I still think, as of right now of this pod, we don't know who technically is going to be the Steelers quarterback here. And the Steelers have shown me through the offseason that they are continuing to try one more year. They are not willing to admit that they need to blow this thing up. And they went ahead and brought in Michael Pittman, which I think is a solid 2 receiver. But you kind of have 2 big body receivers that are – you don't really have a guy that can work the field, that can be in your slot. And I thought losing Kenneth Gainwell, who was kind of this guy for them last year, who can be in some really unique spots and a really good rat guy, is that he's gone. He's no longer with the team. So you have to kind of get a guy to give you some offensive help. They've done a lot of money spending on the defense. I don't think they're going to go back into the draft at this point. They got to get a playmaker, and they take wide receiver from Texas A&M, Casey Concepcion. He's one of those really interesting prospects to come into this class in terms of, let's just say first year, 71 passes, 839 yards, 10 total touchdowns. I should say catches, not passes. He had 320 yards on the ground, 7.8 yards attempt. So basically over 1,100 total yards there. He's basically 25% of the entire offense of that year. And this was at NC State. And a similar type of productivity in his sophomore year. Then he goes over to Texas A&M. And he is the most dynamic guy on the field that they have. Kick return, punt return, 5'11", 187 pounds. So he's kind of this, I use the term human joystick. He's a very incredibly fast. Change of direction is incredible. He is a good separator just because of his speed, and he's a very good route runner. What his obviously is the size is one part of this, and another is sometimes his hands aren't as focused as where they'd like to be. Has more drops than he'd like, but you can put him in the slot. You can put him in the backfield. You can do a 2-back set with him. In terms of comparisons, they're kind of like, he kind of reminds me of Corey Coleman or a little bit of Tavon Austin. He's going to be this gadget guy that can fill the role of Kenneth Gainwell, but also work in the slot for him. So I think this could be a really enticing piece to try and keep Aaron Rodgers in the building. And I do think I think Rodgers is going to stay within the building. I just think that this could be, let's just say, the trifecta for in terms of weapons, because they've already got their tight end set. They've already got, between the two, DK Metcalf and Pittman, and they brought in the running back from Carolina last year, Rico Dowdle. So they're like, hey, Aaron Rodgers, come on in. We got all the offensive weapons here. The defense is still set and same. We can be a very productive unit. So I think it makes sense that they go ahead and get a unique wide receiver to fit what their offense needs, and that's Casey Conception from Texas A&M.
I like that pick. I got him going a little later in my first round here, but I do like that. All right, so for me, this is where it gets a little weird, and I think not weird in terms of a trade, but I have the second quarterback going off the board here, Ty Simpson of the University of Alabama. Now, I know we have Will Howard, and Will Howard has some fanboys, and I know they want Aaron Rodgers, but I think Aaron Rodgers knows that he's a Cowboy, and this is not an actual Dallas Cowboy, but this is his final ride. You know what I mean? I think he could continue to play. I think the Steelers making the playoffs last year invigorated him somewhat, and I think it gives him enough confidence to want to come back and play. However, if you are the Pittsburgh Steelers, you need to make some more moves going towards the future. And there is a case where Arizona, at the end of the first round, trades up and gets Ty Simpson if a team like the Steelers do not select him. I've also read things, at least in the past months, that kind of talked about the Rams maybe tinkering with that. Well, I don't think that's an option anymore. So I think Pittsburgh is going to take a swing here and go ahead and draft Ty Simpson. Now, Ty Simpson is not a day one starter. I don't think the Steelers view Will Howard as much as they like to talk him up. I don't think they view him as the quarterback of the future. And I think that Ty Simpson just makes sense for them. He's got kind of a live arm. He can make a lot of really, really tough throws, which is very interesting because I've heard some critiques of Ty that he doesn't all the time. The routine, the intermediate, the stuff you're supposed to do, he doesn't always do that perfectly. But then you watch his tape and he makes some real home run throws. He's willing to make those kind of throws. And so I think the scenario that is intriguing about Ty Simpson is that, okay, you're willing to make these big throws, you're willing to take these chances. Now, if we can clean up some of the mechanics, if we can clean up some of the more routine stuff, he's going to be an upper tier quarterback. I'm not saying like a top. I could see him being like a top 14 quarterback-ish, best case scenario. You could make it to the playoffs with Ty Simpson. I don't think you're going to win a Super Bowl with Ty Simpson, frankly, but in a year with weak quarterbacks, with Dante Moore returning to Oregon, Ty Simpson seems to be the consensus second quarterback off the board. And he's not, he's 6'2", 6'3", kind of in there. He's kind of a prototypical build for a quarterback, not one of these huge, hulking monster kind of guys, but he is a good, solid pocket passing quarterback who is willing to take some chances. I like Ty Simpson in that respect. He also got some good coaching under, no matter what Alabama fans want to say, Kalen DeBoer, who's more of an offensive coach, and I think he learned a lot under Kalen DeBoer. He'd been in Alabama's system for 4 years. He waited 3. I don't remember if he had a redshirt freshman or not, but he did wait 3 years to play. And then his last year, he got a chance. He finally took over the offense. He didn't transfer out, and he led them to a college football playoff appearance. He did have some shaky games against most famously the University of Georgia in the SEC championship game. He didn't look good there, but I think by and large, there's enough to like about Ty Simpson for the Steelers to go ahead and take a swing here. And you had them taking a wide receiver, which I think makes total sense. And if they took a wide receiver, that would make a lot of sense to me. I think they went about this offseason trying to shore up their wide receiver room a little bit. They obviously went out and got Michael Pittman, who I think is more of a kind of an intermediate range wide receiver. He's not going to go over the top a lot. I think you're going to be able to give him a lot of short to intermediate routes and just kind of be an athletic, sure-handed, reliable wide receiver who has some, dynamic ability. And I think you're going to want to give a young player that, although he's not going to be able to play this much this year because the Steelers are trying to make the playoffs, and they are still in league for Aaron Rodgers. So this is a project play for Pittsburgh. This is a look to the future for Pittsburgh. I definitely think they take him. He will be sitting, and that's who I have Pittsburgh taking. I think this makes a lot of sense, and if they don't, so be it. But I have them taking a swing here.
You have more faith in the Steelers than I do.
That's fair. I think that is totally fair. It's not like the Steelers are a perfect organization anymore.
Yeah. Let's move on from the Steelers here. And our number 2 overall pick, we have the LA Chargers here. If you don't mind, I'll kind of tee off on this one where I think the Chargers had kind of their nightmare season last year, despite them making the playoffs, with their offensive line, their premier young tackles just getting sent to the slaughterhouse this past year with the injuries that they had. And I think you have one of the Harbaughs there, they pride themselves on running the ball, building this offensive line, and they're going to count on these tackles being back with Alt and the other gentleman who I cannot remember, but Darisaw? I can't remember. But they're 2 phenomenal young prospect tackles, and they've already cemented themselves as great tackles in this league. So they're going to try to help them out on that offensive line, give them some more depth, and I think this guy will start right away, especially the Mekhi Becton experiment has failed for them. So they are going to take the second guard out of this class from Oregon, Emmanuel Pregnon. And he definitely has some impact potential right out of the gate. He's a mauler, 6'5", 320 pounds. He has notably longer arms for the guard position. He has great hands. He's quick. They say he's very violent. He's great anchoring, power, and strength. They will say in terms of his lateral explosiveness and his gap-to-gap reach is a little bit. So what I mean by that is getting to the second level, a little bit tougher for him. So his first line meeting contact, whether that's defensive tackle or an end or a stunt or incoming pass rusher on a blitz, does a phenomenal job with. He just struggles to get to that second level a little bit more. So it sounds like, hey, he's, from what I've read, he's been a really good pass blocker, which is something that they've needed for Justin Herbert. So it sounds like, hey, he's going to help out in the run game in that first level, and he's going to be a very good protector. And they need to protect Justin Herbert because if they have any hopes of making a deeper run in the playoffs or potentially getting to a Super Bowl, it has to be on the back of Justin Herbert, and getting a guy to protect him on this offensive line would be a fantastic pick. Emmanuel Pregnon, guard from Oregon.
I went a little fun here with the Chargers pick. I had them taking the wide receiver Jordan Tyson. I thought it would be a fun pick if he fell this far due to the kind of injury history of him, people staying away. I think, Justin Herbert and the Chargers could use some more wide receiver depth. I think he is obviously a very good player. He is a player that I've heard at times compared to Odell Beckham Light from some podcasters, the way he moves around the field, which is a little bit interesting. But I think he slips a little bit because of the injuries, and the Chargers are able to get him on a discount here in the latter half of the first round. Nothing super crazy. I just think they need more wide receiver depth, and I think he could overall take this offense to a next level and probably even take over the offense if he falls to Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert. So probably not very likely to happen, but this is like we're getting toward the back half of the draft here where things get a little more complex, a little harder to pin down, and I just kind of went for it. I'll start off the next pick, which is the Philadelphia Eagles, I believe. I had, this name is going to be unfortunately hard to pronounce. I had them taking an offensive lineman, Max Ionador from Arizona State.
I don't know how to pronounce them either. It's funny you say that, though, because I got them taking the exact same player. So the fact that we picked the same guy this late is funny.
I'll let you go on this one. I don't know a lot about him, but I do know that the Eagles' offensive line is aging a little bit. They do need offensive line help. They've had some key retirements over the past couple of years, most notably Jason Kelsey. Obviously, they don't play the same position, but Lane Johnson is aging on the offensive line. He may be a Hall of Fame player, but he's not going to be as reliable going forward. He's had some, injuries. He's been banged up. He's played for a long time in the NFL. I believe he's in the 2013 draft. So I had the Eagles going for Mr. Max here to give them some new, fresh meat on the offensive line and protect Jalen Hurts and also help initiate the tush-push.
Yeah, this guy right here, he's kind of a berry pick where he's going to be the replacement for Lane Johnson because we're on the assumption that Lane Johnson is in potentially his last year or down that road. But he's an interesting backstory. So he actually comes from Nigeria. He didn't play for high school. He didn't play football until he got to high school. 6'5", 315 pounds, over 34-inch arms. He is basically, he's long, he's strong, he's explosive, and they say he's pretty athletic for his build. But they notice that his pass sets are, let's just say, inexperienced. That's what I would call it. Not that he can't do it, but he's a true natural run blocker, which is what Lane Johnson does on the right side of that ball. So I could see them taking this, burying it, expecting Lane Johnson to retire in the next year or two, and maybe he plays a rotational piece. Maybe he plays at a guard spot, potentially coming in. But this is one of those guys where they're gonna cook with him. They're gonna sit there and hype him up, coach him up, and this is going to be a guy that I think which I do believe in Philadelphia can develop their offensive line. I think he will be maybe not a big face this year, but give it 2 to 3 years, and I think he can be a pillar for this offensive line going forward.
All right, the next pick is going to be made by the Cleveland Browns. I don't really have a lot to say for this pick. I mean, we're getting to the back half here, but I had them taking offensive tackle from Clemson, Blake Miller, 6'6", 310 pounds. I think that's the second Clemson Tiger I had going off my board, just kind of shoring up the offensive line for Cleveland. And I'll tee you up. Who did you have Cleveland taking here?
Yeah, I also went offensive tackle here. I still have the opposing offensive tackle from Utah here, Caleb Lamu, 6'5", 302 pounds. Good explosive flexibility. If we're saying like in terms of college football, in terms of a team standpoint, Utah had the best tackle tandem in all of college football last year. He is not, let's just say this guy traditionally played more on the left side. He's not as powerful as his teammate, as his other offensive tackle tandem, but he does a really good job in terms of just helping out with pass protection. They say he's a really good technician, really good with hand placement, really good at readjusting his feet, a really good hand fighter, which is what you want on that left side of the line because that's your quarterback blind side unless you're the Atlanta Falcons. But they're saying he's extremely flexible for his position, which is what you need to have when you're facing this pass rush, good at absorbing power. I don't like this player comp. They said Will Campbell, but I think That would
the
be
guy
a very
with the short arms.
Yeah, but they're not complaining. They didn't even mention anything about his arm length in the profiles that I was looking through here. But Cleveland, they have a phenomenal defense, and first pick for them, I made them take Carnell Tate to help out the wide receiver room, and then I had them going back to the offensive line, help protect whoever the hell you're going to have at quarterback at the end of the season.
I should not. I said sports hate earlier, and I'm going to start saying that from now going
sports
forward.
Hate.
But I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't be throwing shade about having short arms because I also have short arms as a short man. But anyway, the next pick in the draft, I have the Chicago Bears taking Clemson edge TJ Parker. So I think the Bears are looking, just for some more explosive talent on the defensive side of the ball. Around 6'3", 6'4", 265, good frame, good length. I think he's been able to, engage with offensive tackles pretty effectively over the years. And this is just a good athletic player for the Bears to kind of work with. He plays really hard from everything I've read, which the Bears certainly need. And he's got, natural pass rush instincts, which is always good. And Dabo Swinney looks for those kind of guys, athletic guys with good instincts. So ultimately, I have the Bears going TJ Parker here. Who do you have Chicago taking?
I've got them taking another, I believe my first Clemson player off the board, and that's Peter Woods, who you had going earlier. And you kind of already talked about him. He is ranked to be the number one defensive tackle coming out of this class. He had a little bit of dip in productivity down at Clemson last year, and they say part of that was because he was asked to put on more weight, get a little bit heavier. So he's coming at 6'3", 315. He's lost a little bit of that weight, which is most likely what teams want him to be, a little bit lighter, which it's funny saying 315 is light, but for D-tackle it is. But he's a very versatile 3-tech and beyond kind of guy. He's a great attacker. He's got great lateral agility. He's very explosive. He's one of those guys that I do not want to put the term – I'm not even going to say the player that I want to, but he kind of reminds me of a smaller Ed Oliver, where Ed Oliver for the Bills is a very explosive athlete. He's a little bit bigger, but he's not your traditional nose tackle type. He's definitely trying to hit the one gap, the two gap. But I think Chicago, regardless, is trying to build up the interior, their defensive line with this pick, whoever it might be, just to help solidify that rush defense for them.
All right, so the next pick is going to be made by the Buffalo Bills, and I have them taking Cassius Howe from Texas A&M, kind of a twitchy edge defender. He was originally at Bowling Green State University, transferred to Texas A&M. He's about 6'3", 250, but he's kind of like a lean athlete with good burst, good power, and I think Buffalo, last year they were kind of rolling with, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was Von Miller still, he was not on Buffalo last year, was he? He was on L.A., is that right?
He definitely wasn't on Buffalo.
Okay.
I can't remember where Von Miller was at.
They did have Joey Bosa, though, who's an older player.
I thought he was. He's with the Commanders.
Okay,
last
gotcha.
year.
Yeah, that's man. Well, he's really a journeyman at this point. So, but anyway, they didn't have a lot on the edge there last year, especially in terms of youth. With Von Miller leaving in the past, they were kind of putting some duct tape, I would say, on the edge rusher position a little bit. They had Joey Bosa there. Now you get a fast twitch, lean guy who's a little bit raw, who you're going to be able to coach up, and I think he's going to play well for Buffalo. I think that's going to give them a little more dynamism over there on that defense. Who do you have the Bills taking?
I think they're extremely happy with this pick. I think they're trying to get another edge rusher presence. You've seen how many players they've cycled through. You've already mentioned the past few years, and they finally just invest in a defensive end rusher, and that's Akeem Mesidor, the other defensive end from Miami. He's a little bit older, 25 years old, coming out as a rookie, but you're going to start seeing that, especially with this class in particular, with the age as the rounds go on. 6'2", 273 pounds. He basically is known for being very versatile multi-alignment rusher, which I think would really help with Buffalo. 3 technique, 5 technique, 7 technique, stand-up rusher. He has played multiple spots of the defensive line, and you saw that in a national championship where Ruben Bain also bounced around, but he's definitely more the anchor, and they used Mesidor to really try to dictate the play and where it was going. But basically, he is, because of where his versatility is at, but he's very good with the stunts. He's great with one-on-ones. He has a variety of different moves and counters. He has to be because of where they moved him around. So I think despite, he's 25 years old, I think he has more tools equipped than maybe some other pass rushers that went ahead of him in this class, and he can kind of be a plug and a play. And he doesn't have to be the star because Buffalo has already got some of these pieces, like I mentioned, Ed Oliver and some other guys on this defensive line. I think they can get some good productivity right out of the gate with him there. So I think if Buffalo had Akeem Mesidor there from Miami, Florida, I think they would be ecstatic with the potential production right out of the gate.
All right, next pick is the San Francisco 49ers. I'll throw it to you first. Who do you have the Niners taking?
I got them digging a little bit deeper. There's been some discussion whether this guy's going to be a first-round pick or kind of early to mid-second round. I have them taking a guy from Toledo, a safety, Emmanuel McNeil Warren, who's been getting a lot of praise the past few weeks. Is kind of this guy rising up from a, let's say, Group 6 program here. 6'3", 209 pounds, 32-inch arms. He was a teammate to Quinion Mitchell, so that name should sound familiar. So he's definitely got some tape up with there. But he's extremely fast. He's kind of like this athletic freak, and that's why he's been rising up the boards. Very fast, lateral explosiveness, agility. He can play a little bit more in the box. He's very good with short and intermediate zones. He's not like Mitchell where he can play as a corner. He truly is a safety, box safety. He can play different, rover. He can play high 2, high 1. He has that flexibility. And even though he's going to San Francisco and they rarely ever use a high 1 safety, they missed their, I can't remember his name, Telefunga or something like. He went over to the Denver Broncos this past season, and the 49ers really rely on heavy safety play, and I think this could be them, hey, let's go get our athletic freak, put him back there and kind of rebuild this defense after we've lost a couple guys, handful of guys, just a free agency, and that's what happens when you have a good team. You got to start paying guys, they leave, and this is how you build it back up through the draft. But I think he's a very good, just traditional kind of strong safety role where he's gonna help in the run game for sure. He can lay the wood, and he can be reliable in the pass coverage.
So I went Omar Cooper here from IU to be the San Francisco 49ers' newest wide receiver. They had Brandon Ayuk in the past, and he kind of flamed out with them, and now they're looking for another kind of big play outside threat, which is generally what Cooper had played at Indiana. And this is a guy I'm a big fan of here. Not only did he win a national championship with the Hoosiers, but I want to talk about a little bit like loyalty. I mentioned it with Ty Simpson earlier. This guy has a classic college football story. So he was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. He's from Indianapolis. He was born in Indianapolis. He committed to IU. And he was in the class of, I believe, 2022. So he redshirted his first year. And then the next 3 years, he proceeded to get better and better and better. So his first year, 2023, only had a little north of 250 receiving yards, no touchdowns. 2024, about 500, 600 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. And then this past year, the best year in the Hoosiers uniform, 937 receiving yards. He had 69 receptions and 13 touchdowns. And what's interesting about that is Curt Cignetti and Fernando Mendoza like to spread the ball around. So he still got 13 touchdowns, even on this really capable Indiana offense. He was leading them in all sorts of ways, especially with his leadership in the locker room. And I think that This is just a classic college football story we don't see too much of anymore, and I think Cooper has played himself into being a first-round draft pick, which is really commendable on his part. And he kind of profiles, as I was saying earlier, as an outside receiver with a lot of upside, and to be, a developmental kind of player that once he gets his feet underneath of him, I think he's going to be very consistent for a long time. I think this is a guy who I'm pretty positive will succeed in the NFL, and especially if he goes to the San Francisco 49ers. So I have them taking Omar Cooper Jr. from IU. I like that pick a lot. In fact, I maybe would even bet on that if I was a betting man in this draft season.
Yeah, I mean, don't be wrong, San Francisco would love to have that weapon. I'd be shocked if he was still there. Being said,
did you have Omar going already?
Yeah, I had him going to the Jets.
That's where I got it mixed up. Okay, fine. That makes sense, though. Sorry, I was getting confused. But yeah, the Jets could definitely take him there. But yeah, go for it.
No, I was going to say 28. I think this one's kind of straightforward. Pick 28 is Houston. I think they do have a little bit of a need on that defensive line, just on the interior there. And just basically looking for a Dexter Lawrence prototype kind of situation. And I think they take defensive tackle Caden McDonald from Ohio State. He's a traditional 0-and-1 technique. They want to try to plug up the middle of that line, let Will Anderson, let Hunter get to work on the outside there, let them get the sacks. 6'3", 326 pounds. He's very explosive, known for his raw power. He had his teammate, McDonald, Williams coming out last year. They say he's very comparable to him, but he's a good block shedder. He's a good absorber. He was basically really known for taking on the majority of double teams for that Ohio State team last year, and that's exactly what they're looking to have. He's basically a run game wrecker, and he's there to plug up the middle, and that's his job. He's not going to be ever an elite pass rush force. He's not that type of defensive tackle, but guess what? Houston doesn't need him to be. That's not how their team is built. So they're going to just compile on picks that defensive line, ride that defense out to try to make a trip to the Super Bowl.
I mean, you explained it just as well as I could have, and you know much more about him than I do. But I also had Houston taking Cade McDonald here, going to add to D'Amico Ryan's defense. I think that's just a really solid pick there for Houston, and I'm assuming he's going to do really well, especially within a D'Amico Ryans-led defense. The next team taking a pick here is Kansas City. I had them taking edge rusher Malachi Lawrence from Central Florida, and it's getting towards the back end of this, but I think Kansas City ultimately just wants to add a little bit more dynamism to their pass rush game. I think this guy will fit in well with the Chiefs, and towards the back end of the first round here, you're looking for gems, and these are oftentimes guys who will get selected either on upside or kind of taking a chance, or they're just going to get scalped by these good teams who are drafting late. Now, Kansas City obviously didn't end up with this late of a pick by being good last year, but they are typically one of the best teams in the NFL, so I think they're going to go ahead and select Malachi Lawrence from Central Florida. Who do you have taking? Who do you have? I can't fucking talk. Oh my god.
We've been talking for a long time.
Who do you have Kansas City taking here?
This is my dark horse player in the draft. This is one of my favorite receivers in this entire draft. He's from Washington. His name is Denzel Boston. And I think if Kansas City were to spend a pick on this man, if he's available, it is going to be a nightmare for their offense. I should say for Kansas City's offense against the rest of the league in their division. 6'4", 209-pound receiver. He broke out in 24, 63 catches, 834 yards, 9 touchdowns. He's basically a red zone mismatch guy. He's huge. I wouldn't say he's like a twitchy athlete or he's very explosive with his speed, but he's a very smooth strider and how he walks. The big thing is last year he has a 1.2% drop rate. This guy has glue on his hands. He doesn't drop it. 881 yards, 11 touchdowns, 62 receptions. He is basically a high point catcher. He's a contesting catcher. Whatever the top guy, the liaison, he's the man for this. He is what a prototypical receiver profile needs. So, hey, guess what? They bring in Denzel Boston. He's the outside wide receiver. They let Rashee Rice kind of work in the slot there, and your gadget guy is always Hurt Boy, who is 170 pounds and will get blown away by the wind. I'm saying this because I can't remember his name, but you know who I'm talking about. Travis Kelce hurt him last year, I think multiple times, if I remember right. But Denzel Boston is one of my favorite wide receivers out of this class just because of his size. His hands are fantastic. He was a large part of this Washington offense, and I think if he goes to the right team that needs an outside receiver, you pair him up with Patrick Mahomes whenever he's ready, I think he could be a problem for a lot of teams where they didn't really have an outside threat. They didn't have a deep threat, and now they do with this guy. When I say deep threat, I mean like, hey, good luck trying to jump up and out-catch this guy. I'm not talking about speed. I'm talking about just a big body, and I think that's something that Kansas City has missed for quite some time.
With the next pick, it's the Miami Dolphins. I had Miami taking Casey Concepcion. You were talking about him earlier in the draft. I think you had him going to Pittsburgh. I have him going to Miami here. And the same story I mentioned with Monroe Freeling applies to Casey Concepcion. Miami's looking for any level of talent. They obviously lost Jalen Waddle this offseason. They traded him away. So I think that Miami is looking for another wide receiver to build around to help out Malik Willis. And Casey Concepcion is a very interesting kind of like dynamic playmaker. He's not on the tall side. He's only about like 5'10", 5'11", about 185 to 195 pounds. So he's not like this big wide receiver, but he's able to play all over the field. He's pretty good in the slot. He's good on taking some like jet motions and that type of stuff. So I think that Casey Concepcion is really just going to be dynamic. We've used that word a lot, but honestly, I mean, what other word could you possibly use for a player like this? I think Miami just needs guys. They just need guys, and he's going to be a guy for them going forward if he falls to them.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the more interesting guys out of this class just in terms of how versatile he is. I think wherever he goes, he's going to be interesting. I hope it, regardless of where he does go, it works out for him. But with my pick there, I think I got them flipping over to the other side, going to the defense, taking basically the replacement for Jamon McCoy at Tennessee last year after he had torn his ACL. And I think they take Colton Hood, who's obviously another corner from Tennessee. He racked up an interception last year, 8 pass breakups, 4 tackle for losses. In terms of his impact score for the corner position, with the metric that I really like to use, 87.3, 6 foot, 195 pounds. He's what I would say is that he is still learning to play. He's very aggressive. All of these guys in the first round are, for the most part, explosive athletes, quick twitch, good about the hips. I'm not going to dive into that because we've already heard it 3 to 4 times by now. But what he does is that he's very aggressive, so he definitely tries to jump routes. He tries to make plays happen, which is great, but sometimes that can put him in a bad position. So just learning to be more patient, having more discipline. He's a very, very good press corner, one of the better press corners in the class. And he plays bully ball right off of that line. He's physical. He tries to get you off of his route. And he can run stride for stride with any wide receiver in this class going along with that. So I think they really get a nice piece at the corner position with Colton Hood out of Tennessee.
Next pick up is the AFC champion New England Patriots. I have New England taking edge rusher Zion Young of Missouri. He's a big guy, around 6'5", 6'6", 260, athlete. I think, they need good edge rush talent. He's obviously got all the physical traits. He's got good burst off the line. He can cover some ground a little bit. He's got some upside, and I think that's ultimately what New England is looking for. I think he's going to be able to kind of play in rotation with a lot of these guys they already have. So Zion Young is who I have as the New England Patriots selection. Who do you have here at 31?
Deja vu, same exact guy.
Nice. All right.
I like Zion Young from Missouri. He's, coming out. He basically was a transfer from Michigan State. And 6.5 sacks, 2025, 16.5 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, 33-inch arms at a 6'5", 255-pound frame. Athletic, lean mass. I think the main point is, he's a really good run game kind of guy too. He can play both run game, pass rush. I'd say pass rush is maybe a little bit more raw compared to his run stopping ability, but he can definitely develop. And I think part of this is that Zion Young, I hate to bring up this part, I think he would be going much higher in the draft, probably another potentially 10 to 15 picks, but he did have a DWI back in December. So that's definitely hurt his stock in town a little bit, but New England can really develop this. They've lost some of their defensive pieces from their Super Bowl run, so I look for them to replenish on this defensive side unless just some guy slides or they have a really high opinion on a wide receiver that's still available. But I think Zion Young is a perfect fit to try to retool this defense.
And, New England's never been afraid to take guys like that, so it just kind of makes sense that he would get selected there at 31. The last pick is the Super Bowl champion. I like saying that. Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. That's an ethical Super Bowl champion, folks. I have them taking running back Jadarian Price from Notre Dame. They're going to go running back here. They could take anybody, really. I mean, Seattle has a very deep defense, although they've lost some guys this offseason to free agency. I think Seattle is kind of playing with house money. They won a Super Bowl early in Mike McDonald's career. They have Sam Darnold on a pretty good contract. So with the loss of Kenneth Walker to the Kansas City Chiefs, I think they go ahead and replenish the running back position with a young guy at the back end of the first round who's going to be able to have a good, affordable contract. When they didn't have Kenneth Walker last year, they were rolling out there with Zach Charbonnet. They were, I can't remember the other gentleman's name, but I think this guy is going to be able to give them some big play, explosive ability. He's 5'10", 200, but kind of a compact guy, and he's missed time due to injury. But ultimately, when he's on the field, he's pretty productive, and his athleticism certainly shows up in tape. So I think they're going to take Jadarian Price. And I remember the last time, I believe, the Seattle Seahawks took a first-round running back. That did not work out so well. It was Rashad Penny out of San Diego State. I did have him on my fantasy team one year. It didn't work out so well. And I'm a little surprised he wasn't as good. A lot of these running backs, unless you're the high echelon running backs taken in the first round, these are generally, swings in the dark. I mean, some of the running backs I can think of off the top of my head taken late in the first round, guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he didn't really work out. Doug Martin was a good player for a few years. Rest in peace, Doug Martin. But I remember he was taken at the back end, if not the last pick or the second to last pick of the first round. So it's really, kind of a shot in the dark here. And I think they're going to go running back because Seattle really has a big hole there. Who do you have Seattle taking?
So this is just one of those things where, Seattle doesn't have a whole lot of picks coming in. I've heard from stuff that, hey, we want to kind of move back, get some more picks just to help replenish this roster a little bit. So I was kind of looking around, who's a team that needs a quarterback that's got some extra picks laying around? And I decided to look at the famous graveyard with the New York Jets moving into the 32 overall pick to get this fifth-year option potentially with quarterback Ty Simpson from Alabama. You've already kind of talked about him. I'm not going to dive a whole lot into it. He's definitely more of a, if you want to talk about potentially implement now and be set with. He's had more of a role in I don't want to say a pro-style offense, but he was allowed to make a lot, and I've talked about this in the past, a lot of decisions at the line, changing plays and whatnot, able to make decisions based on what the defense is showing him. So he could be potentially more of a plug-and-play guy. I don't think the Jets would want to do that, but it's the Jets. I don't trust them to do anything, and I would feel awful if Ty Simpson actually went to the Jets. I'm doing this more of I think Seattle will trade down to get more picks. I just don't know with who. The Jets are just the one that I picked on the dartboard. And I will say just an overall with the draft, in terms of the trade, I think I saw, of course you can bet on everything right now. I think the over-under for trades in this draft is like 6.5, and I've only had 2. So I do not expect our drafts to be anywhere perfect. I think it's more of an accuracy of like, hey, where do I think potentially is a potential need for this team? I'm happy if I get the position right, let alone the player. I'll probably shit my pants if the Cowboys actually do trade up to 3. That's just based off of just what I've been hearing. I'm like, it makes sense. Let's spice it up. Because I like the draft board with how it looks with this potential versus letting Arizona just kind of, sit there at 3 and take an offensive tackle. But
one thing
go ahead. Go ahead.
One thing I wanted to say is, and I think I have all of these right, but I'm not sure. I believe we had 11 overlapping picks. I was trying to keep track of that going through. We both had Mendoza, Arvell Reese to the Jets. And again, this is contingent on no trades, et cetera, et cetera. We had Jeremiah Love to the Titans, Carnell Tate to the Browns, Reuben Bain to the Saints. You had Mansour Delane to the Chiefs, I believe. Mekhi Lemon to the Rams. Kenyon Sadiq to the Panthers. Max I to the Eagles. Caden McDonald to the Texans. And Zion Young to the New England Patriots. Is there anybody I'm missing there?
No, I think you got it. That's pretty impressive, though, that we basically had more than a third of our entire draft class be the same team, same picks. And we didn't know any one of our teams or our mock drafts coming in. We had no idea. I wanted to share, but I kept my mouth shut. We both did.
So we reacted to, I guess we really haven't reacted yet. We'll save that for Sunday. But, one thing I wanted to talk about, and we maybe have talked about this before, and I always say that on every podcast. That's such a trope. Like, we've talked about this before. But I'm recalling maybe a conversation about Pittsburgh being the host of the draft. And I kind of wish, one day we'll go to a draft together, and it'll be really awesome. We'll try to record a pod from there. And Pittsburgh would have been so convenient. Obviously, I don't think it would have worked for either of us, considering the timelines and what we've got going on. But as far as Pittsburgh being a draft city, I think it's going to go really well on Thursday. I think Pittsburgh's got a nice, dense downtown. I think the Steelers have a great football culture. I'm often critical of the Steelers, but I don't. That's a good football town. That is one of the best football towns in the United States. Pittsburgh is squarely in the middle of the coaching hotbed of the United States. Plenty of great players have come from there. One off the top of my head, Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Donald, both contemporary future Hall of Famers, two of the best players at their positions ever. So I think Pittsburgh's going to do a damn good job hosting the draft. And I think from a talent standpoint, we've kind of talked about how you're a little higher on this draft than I am, but the overall consensus I feel like people have said is that this is a little bit of a weaker draft. I would maybe agree with that, but where I would go more so on an optimistic note is that I think the guys who are probably going to go in the top 10, like the top 1 through like 8, kind of 8, 9, 10, that area, I think are probably going to be really, really good. I can't foresee a scenario in which a guy like a Jeremiah Love or a Sonny Styles or a Caleb Downs or a Reuben Dane is not a great football player, or at least a one-time Pro Bowler.
Yeah, I agree. I think the top is really, really talented, but I think where this class might stand out, like if we look back on it 5 years from now, is that we're going to see a bunch of guys first, second, third round that are maybe not Pro Bowlers, but very solid starters for the respected franchises. I just think this is going to be a deeper class where it's going to be like, oh yeah, our second round linebacker's been really solid for us. He's been doing really well. Our third round safety or corner, he's been a really nice piece. I didn't think he'd, do as well as he's been doing. I think that's going to be the kind of the key of the class where, what was the one draft? Was it 2013 that everybody says is an awful draft class?
Yes.
With Jake Fisher, number one. Yet, if you look at historically, like compare it to like the year after with 2014 or the year before 2012, they have more Pro Bowlers in that class than the class before or after them. It's just that the top of the class wasn't as sexy as some of the other ones around it. So it has the potential for it to be this kind of class. Like 2013 class, if you look back on it, like that is one of the best linebacker classes of all time, but nobody talks about linebackers. It's not in fantasy football for the most part, or those guys aren't getting the most attention for it. Not a lot of high tier quarterbacks coming out of this class, kind of shallow with Mendoza and then Ty Simpson, and then just a field of everybody else. You don't have no dominant one wide receiver. It's kind of pick your three, and then some guys fall in line behind. You have one running back for the most part, universally, skilled prospect in terms of he's number one on his board. And then it's, hey, we got some guys at tackle and guard. We got some really good positions deep at D-tackle. It's just there's no big names. Besides, you can make the argument the top defensive guys that are going to go in the top 10.
I want to go through really quick. I want to go through this 2013 draft. I'm not going to go super deep, but I'm looking at this now, refreshing my memory. And you are right that there are some good players in this draft. Lane Johnson, probably the best player in the first round from this draft. Eric Fisher drafted at 1, but he was starting left tackle on the Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl team. But the problem with this draft is in the first round, listen to all these guys who were just outright horrible. Luke Joeckel, Deion Jordan, Barkevius Mingo, Jonathan Cooper. I don't know if he was that horrible. Tavon Austin, legendary highlight guy, kind of a role player in the NFL, wasn't that great. D. Milliner, holy crap, I forgot about D. Milliner. Chance Warmack, DJ Fluker, okay. Star Lutulele, shout out. E.J. Manuel, played 3 years. Jarvis Jones, who I thought was going to go number 1 overall for the longest time. He fell hardcore. I remember everybody being like, the Steelers got Jarvis Jones. He did absolutely nothing in the NFL. Bjorn Werner, the German assassin, one of the worst first-round draft picks of all time. I mean, he was just an absolute non-factor for them. Oh, my gosh. Oh, man. This is so Justin Hunter in the top of the second round, wide receiver.
Yeah, this first round was ugly, but if you look at the second round, you're like, man, there's more hits here than there is in the first round.
For sure. There's some good players here.
The third round's got some really good guys. I mean, I could even say, hey, some of the guys in the fourth round
Lev Bell
have had
Travis
some nice
Kelce.
careers.
Larry Warford was a pretty decent player. Tyrann Mathieu, Teron Armstead. I mean, Keenan Allen. I see Logan Ryan in here. I mean, really, David Bakhtiari in the fourth round, I believe.
Yo, Latavius Murray, 6th round.
Micah Hyde in the
Jordan
fifth
Poyer,
round.
7th. Yeah, I mean, there's some. This is a nice draft as a collection.
Yeah. If you redrafted it, you would think, wow, Le'Veon Bell, even Geno Smith, it's not. So Robert Woods was a really, really solid player. Gio Bernard. I mean, so there's some guys in there. But, man, I think people remember this draft certainly for the first round where it was just full of dudes who did not end up being very good. I mean, Ziggy Ansah, the Lions, he had 1 season, I believe. But, as far as first-round values, clearly the scouts were not they weren't having a very good year that year. Everybody that was good was picked in the third round, and there's some Hall of Famers in this draft, and they're like, yep. But I wanted to ask you, off the top of your head, what is your favorite NFL draft of all time?
Oh, man. I think that is a wonderful question. I'm not prepared for that at all.
We could save that till the next one. You don't have to go
Yeah,
super
let's
into
do
it.
that because I want to give you an answer. I don't want to have to sit here and look through draft classes and be like, oh, yeah, that's right, because I'm sitting there trying to go class by class by class. And in terms of, I would say, maybe the potential excitement, not necessarily for my franchise or my team, but I would say probably the draft class that had like Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen and Baker Mayfield, and just because the amount of hype going into that and the amount of quarterbacks that was on there, and everybody has an opinion. You go to a different TV show, I'm watching, Colin Cowherd and he likes Sam Darnold, and I'll go over here and Mike Green has Baker Mayfield. It was just like it could be anybody. Anybody could be right. Anybody could be wrong. There's a lot of hype in there with that draft class. So that was a very entertaining one just in terms of watching on TV. But in terms of, I have to get back to you just in terms of like talent or maybe franchise specific.
All right, I will save mine also. I will say, because I don't know if we'll do an NBA draft one. I feel like I'm behind on the NBA draft. But favorite NBA draft, 2011. Kyrie Irving, Kawhi Leonard. Jimmy Butler at the end of the first round. Klay Thompson. A lot of good players in that draft. But I like it so much because I remember people talking so much crap, saying it was going to be... there were definitely people at the time saying it was the worst draft ever or one of the worst drafts ever, and it ended up being like an incredible draft full of Hall of Famers. So it just goes to show you that sometimes Logan and I are just as good as the guys doing this professionally. And they just have access to more information and they get paid to do it. But we're doing this for free and we're giving you just as good of information. So with that, Logan, do you have anything else?
No, thank you everybody for joining our draft day extravaganza and also our review of the Dexter Lawrence trade. I'm very happy with this episode. I hope this is something we can continue on in the future, but I had a lot of fun with this. This is one of my favorite times of the year just in football in general. I love the hope that you can feel and eventually get your soul crushed when you realize that you're going to miss more than you hit. But nothing will be as bad as watching your team trade away your star wide receiver to hit the Philadelphia and all your hopes and dreams crumble.
And yeah, for me, the two most interesting portions of the draft, the Colts and the Bengals. The Colts obviously traded their first-round pick away, as I mentioned. And then the Bengals, who I was very intrigued on who they would take at 10, have now traded that away for Dexter Lawrence. So I can watch this with clean hands, clear eyes, a full heart. Like, don't have to worry about any, I'm not going to be nervous at all. The most nervous I'll be is to see how many of these picks I actually get right and how many picks you get right. And I know you have a different setup than I do, but I went old school. I had mine on a notebook here. I'm looking at it now. I wrote Martin Truex Jr. on here, the NASCAR driver. I don't know why I did that, but Martin Truex Jr., he could get drafted. So I don't know why I was right. I just like Martin Truex Jr.
That's funny. That's hilarious. It's such it's a callback. I'm like, oh yeah,
And
Martin Truex
what?
Jr. did exist.
He's been on. This was on the paper like probably before I wrote Fernando Mendoza. I think. So that's a little interesting. Also, last quick thing. How many times, over or under 1.5 times, Pat McAfee takes his shirt off?
Over.
Yeah, I'm gonna hit over too. I think that's a near lock because it's his hometown, Pittsburgh. I'd love to see a prop bet on that. I bet it's on DraftKings or something. Anyway,
something.
Y'all, we're gonna let you go. We recorded this on a Tuesday, so this is gonna go up pretty soon. Obviously, subscribe, like, tell your friends, tell your family, and also tune in to the draft this Thursday. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on ESPN. You're going to have a lot of fun. It's that time of year, people. Football, after this, we're going to go into a little bit of a lull for maybe like a month or two, and we're going to be screaming right back into it. It's going to be here before you know it. So stay locked in. Stay subscribed to the BeckDeck podcast. That's all I have to say. Logan, close us out.
Thank you for listening. Everybody have a wonderful night. And if, hopefully, please watch the episode before the draft. I think it'll be more fun to follow along, and you can comment calling us dumbasses or whatever words you'd like. Or you'd be like, wow, that was some great, perspective there, Logan, Kenton. Or you can be like, you're an idiot. My team would never draft that. Please let us know. I want us to be right, but I'm more than happy to be wrong and start a conversation. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your night, a good day, and enjoy the draft on Thursday, 8 o'clock Eastern Time.